The following Conscious Consumer Network recording of a live broadcast is available to purchase in high definition at ethymarket.com. Support free and independent media by becoming a CCN pledger. For €10 a month, you can have unlimited access to CCN high definition downloads at ethymarket.com. Ethymarket, the ethical marketplace for conscious consumers.
Television is not the truth. Television is a goddamn amusement park. Television is a circus, a carnival, a traveling troupe of acrobats, storytellers, dancers, singers, jugglers, sideshow freaks, lion tamers, and football players. We're in the boredom-killing business. So turn off your television sets. Turn them off now. Turn them off right now. Turn them off and leave them off. Turn them off right in the middle of the sentence I'm speaking to you now. Turn them off.
Stop them. An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army.
Welcome to TLBTV, Eradicating Programmed Ignorance. And today we're presenting a 3-hour discussion panel with some of the best individuals, not all of the best, but a big chunk of the best individuals I've had a chance to talk to in a very long time. And what you're going to find out is that we are going to launch a brand new project today. And again, the name of this project is the American Freedom and Unity Project. Now, this is all being brought to you by our favorite network on the internet, and that is Conscious Consumer Network. All right, let me start all this off with a quote. And I'm not going to tell you who that quote is by, because that really doesn't matter. What matters is what is said. Okay? A true leader is identified by those whom they choose to stand beside them, not behind them. Now, remember this quote because its relevance will be made clear as we go further into this 3-hour discussion. Excuse me. So let me do the intro to what we're going to be discussing today. We who struggle for change are all constantly hearing the same old lines. There are too many Americans asleep to accomplish anything of substance, or a majority of Americans are just plain sheep or sheeple. The truth is just the opposite. But the truth be told, this is the biggest line of disinformation we're being fed today. Recent polls show as many as 75 to 80% of Americans polled by mainstream pollsters are painfully aware of the blatant corruption that is now ingrained in our government and our political system. That number rises to as high as 92%, depending on the questions and the polling platform. So as you can see, when somebody is telling you over and over again, too many Americans are asleep, and we are all guilty of that, including the panelists, until we delved into this project, it's just not true. And why isn't it true? How can we prove that to you? Okay, the biggest factor, okay, is that this polling shows that Americans are aware of the political and the breakdown of government as it pertains to we the people in this country. But the second biggest factor is the failure of us to unify our voices via our leadership, or those who head or lead the hundreds of thousands, and I mean that literally, of groups, pages, websites, or organizations in this country. This is the alpha dog syndrome in a lot of cases, or those who resist unity because it will dilute their power or their influence or their particular word. This is not a guess, my friends. This is a fact, okay? And basically what it boils down to is you can't play in my sandbox, go play in your own. Look to see how many of the like-minded forums, no matter what topic you're talking about, or organizations that exist today are locked arm in arm in a coalition to facilitate strength. The answer? Very few. The question, why? The third biggest factor in our failure to unify our voices is the failure of so many, especially those who lead these forums I just mentioned, to realize the many factors or mechanisms that harm or enslave us are all tied to the same root or a common root, perpetrated and perpetuated by the same cast of individuals with the same goal. I'm going to give you a list. Remember, well, you don't have to remember the entire list, but this is what we're going to be covering today. This is what we're going to be pinning together to convince you that when someone tells you too many Americans are asleep to accomplish anything, it is the biggest lie we're being told today. The first category, okay, is political tyranny, which includes things like liberty, freedom, constitution, so on and so forth. The second category, excuse me, perpetual warfare. The third category, economic collapse or economic warfare, the Fed, banksters, etc. Okay, the next category, GMOs, which includes bio and environmental toxins. The next category, vaccines. That is my sore spot. The next category, big pharmaceutical. And yes, we split vaccines and big pharmaceutical, and you'll find out why. They are each a topic unto themselves. The next category, fluoride. The last category, geoengineering. So let me go over the basic topics real quick again. Political tyranny, perpetual war, economic collapse, GMOs, vaccines, big pharma, fluoride, and geoengineering. Now, let me go a little further. These are the big dogs of tyranny, okay? There are many more of lesser magnitude being perpetrated simultaneously on humanity and focused in their largest fashion on America. Everything I just mentioned to you, every single category, the United States is under the hammer in the biggest fashion on the planet in each and every one of them. That is easily provable, okay? And we, the people, are under the hammer because we're in the crosshairs. This is a fact. It's not a guess. How many people railing against one of these topics either stop to consider or ever stop to consider that they all have the same root? Okay, they are all mechanisms of the same cast being used for a single goal. Well, they are. And we're going to show you that today. Okay, and let me explain to you why I know they're all mechanisms of the same cast. You don't fight a war with a pistol. You fight a war with a pistol, a rifle, a tank, a bomber, an aircraft carrier, a submarine, etc. The point being that this elite caste is waging all-out war against humanity and facilitating all the above mechanisms of the same root to succeed in this war. Their goal is for ultimate control through political control, economic control, and population control via health factors, which encompass all of those categories I brought to you above, the 8 big dogs. We are constantly being fed the lie because it generates and enhances division, ego, disunity, and despair. We know this. In 1981, William Casey of the CIA made a statement that should ring in your head as loud as the Liberty Bell, if that sucker could still ring. And what he said is, we will know our program of disinformation has succeeded when everything the American people believe is false. So, what is the biggest lie we're being told today? You're never going to get anywhere because there's not enough Americans awake. It's a lie. All major factors in our failure to unify our strengths and numbers. Yes, it is the disinformation game being played by those who stand to lose the most by the awakening and the unity of we the people. Some of the information that will be presented in this show includes just how many people, and again, these are rough numbers. We have no way of telling, but we dug into it enough to give you good rough numbers, are involved in each of these 8 categories, and just how big the awake portion, okay, to at least one of these mechanisms of this country really is, and how we will work to unify this already massive voice for change. I call this critical mass. For anybody who doesn't realize this, critical mass already exists in America. It's just that most Americans don't know this. Yes, we are strong. We're massively strong, and it's time to unite. On this special 3-hour episode of TLBTV Eradicating Program Ignorance, I would love to present to you a panel of ultra dedicated individuals in the field of fighting this elite caste against many of the above listed weapons being used against humanity. Those who give their all constantly and continuously to unite us and push back on what can only be described as the darkest point in modern human history. What you will hear today will shock and awaken many to the monumental lie that not enough Americans are awake, and start us all on the path of true unity in numbers that can no longer be ignored, dismissed, or silenced. The all-star team that I have here, and I'm just going to mention your names at this point, then we'll start calling you in. Randy Moggins, who's going to discuss economic warfare. Rebel Siren, who's going to discuss GMOs. Russ Tanner, who's going to discuss geoengineering. Susan Price, who's going to discuss perpetual warfare. M. Stephen Gronka, Steve as we like to call him, who's going to discuss political tyranny, and myself, who's going to discuss the triad of super evil, big pharma vaccines and fluoride, which you've lumped into one big kick in the American public's teeth. Now, before we go too much further, I need to let everybody know that this would be a 1-hour forum today, which would give us all a chance basically to wave at you. But due to the generosity of a very good friend of mine and a huge contributor to the Liberty Beacon Project, being that he runs our radio network and he is our IT specialist, Randy Moggins of Off Planet Radio, we now have 3 hours. So, Randy, I would like to give you a couple of minutes here to step in and say something on the lines of what you put on the meme you put on your Facebook wall yesterday, because I thought that was just absolutely phenomenal.
I don't remember what I posted now. It goes something like this.
Most of it up.
It goes something like this, and it's something I've reiterated a number of times, many forums, over the last 15 years that I've been doing this. And it is that this space we call the Patriot/Liberty/Freedom movement has been seriously riven with division because of basic human frailties that we've failed to recognize and overcome. My experience has been largely that this space, this movement, is divided because of some serious flaws in human character, mainly that of ego and the desire to amass personal power, to have proprietary information, to sequester information, to keep information flow contained within a group for purposes of continuing to preserve power. This, by the way, is the exact same methodology used by the cabal to control the people, not just of the United States, but of the world in general. And it is a strategy which only works when it's highly concentrated and orchestrated from the highest circles of power. It does not work in a grassroots organization. Most people have not recognized that the game that we are in right now is in final stages. We either win this game or we go down and we do not get another chance to bring back this nation, bring back this constitutional form of government, the great experiment that began way back in the 1700s. We don't get another chance at this. So your personal vanities, your personal egos, your need to have power, your desire for proprietary information go down in flames, and you will live in a totalitarian hell, which will never allow you, the leaders out there, and I'm talking to the leaders right now, to exercise your ability to functionally change this system for the better. We have to put aside our differences. We have to put aside our pettiness. We have to allow that each person has a piece of the game, and we come together as a collective mindset, not a collective, and bring our wisdom to the table and begin to work with each other and reason together.
A true leader can be distinguished by those they choose to stand beside them, not behind them. What you're looking at right here, these 6 individuals, including myself, make up half of the board of directors for this new project. There is no chairman. Nobody sits at the top of the totem pole and nobody sits at the bottom of the totem pole. We are all standing in a line stretched out, locked arm in arm. If we're going to preach it, we damn right well better be practicing it, and we will practice it. And we started, even in our group where we put together the board of directors for this project, we have noticed that we're falling back on some of the little bit of infighting, some of the little bit of focusing power, some of the little bit, and there are those among us who nudge us and say, this is exactly what we're pushing back against. This is exactly what we're talking about. So as long as we have, sterling individuals like the 6 sitting in front of you and another 6 who are not part of this show on the board of directors to nudge us along and tell us when we're slipping, then we promise to give you a project that will do things that have never been able to be accomplished in this country to this date. In 2012, I saw a country going to its knees. I saw a country where people were absolutely anti-government, absolutely anti-political incumbents, absolutely huge. I've never seen it that big in my life. Yet 96% of Congress got reelected. Stop and think about that. Why? Because the mindset was, and this is exactly what the mindset was, I did the research. Everybody else's congressman is corrupt, not mine. And here we go again, inserting our personal feelings into it. Okay? I couldn't have made a mistake by voting for this guy. It's all about me. We need to shake that off like water going off of a sheepdog after he jumps out the pool. We need to shake it off, and we need to shake it off hard. Now, I'm going to bring each one of our panelists in one at a time. Give us a quick intro on who you are. Then we're going to go to Russ, because Russ has to have the first speech, because Russ is actually helping somebody who's drowning in a flooded basement in northern Maine, which is in flood conditions right now. So if he has to disappear, I would like him to have put in his 10 minutes worth. And Russ, if you could be here the whole time, we'd all be graciously pleased, because you're one of the most intelligent people on your topic on this planet. And you and I just did a radio show last week, so I actually know that. Okay, so Russ, why don't you start it off by giving us about a minute of who you are and what you're associated with?
Sure. My name is Russ Tanner. I founded Global Skywatch because I was first subject to the aerial spraying, which is often called geoengineering, sometimes popularly called chemtrails, in 2005. I am someone who's lucky enough to taste them and smell them. They burn my sinuses and they caused me to have a host of symptoms. And this is what got me involved in this movement. I was very passionate about it and driven by this ongoing pain. Before that, back in 2000, I had mercury poisoning from amalgam fillings and had since done a large amount of research on mercury and started helping people and publishing information about how people can detox and recover from mercury poisoning. And as I experienced the chemical spraying campaign, the attack that we are currently experiencing from the skies that affects every one of us on this planet right now, I began researching the other toxins that we are clearly being exposed to and accumulating other evidence and information, because we are living in the pinnacle time of history. So I have a lot of passion about this. We are living in a time like no other, where all of us are being attacked by a common foe. And this is going to be exposed on this program tonight. And I thank you, Roger, for having us all here.
Very, very well put. And next, we're going to go to the lady who's way, way back in the background there. Oh, that would be Rebel.
Hello.
Rebel Siren.
Hi, Roger. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate this forum, this platform.
You're going to have to speak up just a little bit, Rebel, please.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Just,
can you hear me?
We can hear you. It's just a little on the low side.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, I'm Rebel Siren, and I started a blog in 2012 when I started becoming acutely aware of what's going on in our world, GMOs and vaccines and climate engineering, all these issues, I started becoming increasingly aware about, and I felt compelled to share information. I don't claim to be a scientist or anything like that, but I have a gift for finding information beyond the mainstream, which I seek to share. And I always encourage everyone to do their own research.
All right, you're being way too modest. You rock, girl. Some of the stuff you put out actually scares me. And that's hard to do.
Why, thank you. Okay, so that's about it. That's my story. I just want to share information and co-create a better world, if that's at all possible at this point.
Oh, yeah. Not only is it possible, but this project and your involvement in it is going to make it much more possible. The next person we're going to talk to is Susan. And Susan, how are you? Please give us your full name if you wish to, and tell us what you're associated with and why you feel this project is something worthy of your time. And your time is very valuable. You are an excellent activist, my friend. You're going to have to unmute your mic.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, we got you now.
Okay, wonderful.
And we also know you wear glasses now, too.
Well, they're my reading glasses. I am a Gold Star mother. My name is Susan Price. My son was killed in Afghanistan, September 8th, 2009. Highly decorated former recon Marine, over 12 years. He had been on a top secret mission within a mission of a very high profile, tied to two Medal of Honor recipients, the Ganjgaw ambush. Very controversial. It's up there with SEAL Team 6 and Benghazi. So what led me into the research 6 years ago was following my son's documents to see what was really going on, because what was being said was not what the story was. What everybody's hearing today, I found out 6 years ago, and actually knew prior to that, because I'm an Army veteran and my father was a Marine as well. So I'm a mother, the giver of life, and I have 7 beautiful grandchildren, 2 gorgeous daughters, and that's my legacy. And America's children, you know, they don't even have a future if we don't jump in at the last minute. We are all here for the same purpose. And I've been fighting and active, you know, very active in my community and on a national scale, and working with other Gold Star mothers, veterans, as well as active duty military. So that's my story. And, you know, we're in it at the last minute, the fight. It's either now or never. As Randy was saying, we have to do something. This is the last minute.
The reason I like to have Randy in these extended shows especially is because he doesn't say a lot, but what he does say sticks with you. It really does. Go ahead, smile for us, Randy. You know it's true. All right. And now I would like to bring Stephen in. And Stephen, you and I have done several radio shows. We've done a television show. We've worked, the Liberty Beacon Project has supported several of your projects. You epitomize the word activism. And it's not so much like me. I sit at this computer 20 hours a day plus 7 days a week. I haven't had a day off in almost 4 years. But you physically get out there and you pound the pavement, you ring the bell, you literally, put your money where your mouth is. So I'm very, very proud to have you along with all of the rest of these fine individuals in this discussion. Please tell everybody who you are and what you feel your contribution can be to this project.
Well, first of all, Roger, it's an honor to be in this group because everyone here is a tremendously able person and people that are putting everything on the line to save what we have left of this nation and literally the world. Because as you mentioned before, And as Randy has mentioned, it's the same cabal that is trying to act as the puppet master for all the nations in the world. But my background is I was academically trained to be a research scientist, specialty area in biology and chemistry. Further specialty area was environmental science as well as genetics. And after I graduated from school, I noticed that in a lot of the reports that you see on television and in the magazines, there are so many lies spewed about what's going on in the environment. It always just completely amazed me that these lies could be perpetrated on the public, and not enough people that really know would speak up and rebut these lies and try to put an end to them. I was pretty much in that category myself for a long time because, like everyone here, somehow you got to pay the bills along the way. And I had gotten into the television industry through the foundation I worked for, Advance America Foundation, and I volunteered to do the video production for the Truckers' Ride for the Constitution in October 2013. And through that met Zeta Andrews, who was one of the co-founders of that movement of truckers to go into DC
and also one of our board of directors.
Yeah, yeah, I've been honored to be a part of the board. It's just such a great group of people that it's humbling to be with people of such immense knowledge and drive and ambition to really correct what's going on in the world. But through Truckers' Ride for the Constitution, then became, at the request of Zeta Andrews, the chairman of Constitutional Patriots. And then the We the Truckers, who did the same sort of ride to Washington, only they set up on a flatbed trailer 10-foot high replicas of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and had them across the street from the Washington Monument and basically in the background of the White House, and went down there to try and draw attention to the fact that our political leaders and the bureaucrats that are appointed by them have completely or nearly completely abandoned the Constitution and the other founding documents. And it's a travesty what's going on. It's a disgrace to this nation that was founded on liberty. It's to the point where it puts you at a loss for words to even describe what a disgrace it is for this country to be in the position that it is now. And we really have to stand together. I mean, this is a team effort.
Yes.
Everything I've done has been a team effort with other people. The key thing is that we really do need to stand together and make a strong statement and a strong action. And the action that we have recently been very strong about presenting to the public is that elected officials and bureaucrats, even though they represent the law, they are not above the law. And when they commit crimes, and one of those crimes being that they do not respect their oath of office and do not honor the oath of office or honor the duties that they have in office, then they need to be prosecuted. And it is possible to prosecute these people. Many people across the country are now recognizing that they can go into court, build a case, and successfully prosecute these people. So we need to have more of that, because one thing that we've seen is that the rallies, protests, marches, and petitions are all nice, but the power brokers, the cabal, as Randy mentioned, basically they're happy to see all that stuff because they know the public is blowing off steam and the conflict level sort of reduces for a while, and people go home and their energies burn out and everything gets quiet for a while, and we sort of go back to the same routine over again. But we haul people into court it's a whole new avenue, and people suddenly start to get ticked off about somebody recognizing that they've committed a crime. Oh, perish the thought of that we should actually identify that these people are committing crimes. So I think that's a key thing in the future is heavy emphasis on hauling these criminals into court and prosecuting them, getting them out of office, get people in there that understand the Constitution. And that's another thing. We as a people, and I mentioned this in my speech when it comes up, we don't even require politicians to know anything about the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, or the Federalist Papers when they become a candidate for office. That's totally incorrect. Well, I mean, the very minimum we should be requiring that these people know those things. So that's the direction I think we ought to go, and look forward to working with everybody here on these types of things and moving forward in all the areas that people are going to hear about tonight.
Well, I will tell you that not only do I agree with everything you say, but you put it well. Again, I'm going to go back to the original quote, and this is the motto of this project. A true leader is recognized by those he chooses to stand beside him, not behind him. This is the theme we want everybody to take away from this. So we're going to start on these 8 big dogs that we discussed, okay? And first off is going to be Russ, because he might have to disappear and go do some bailing in the basement. So you got a lot of rain up there right now, huh?
Yeah, we just had a lot of storms move through, and have some family members have got some flooding, and yeah, we're out of power most of the day. So it's been quite an experience up here, but life in rural Maine, that's how it goes.
All right, now you're going to give us about a 10-minute dissertation on geoengineering, and it doesn't have to be exactly 10 minutes, but somewhere in that vicinity. And then we'll throw the floor open for discussion before we go on to the next topic. And the thing of it is, what you're going to find here, and I want everybody to listen for this, each and every one of these topics is going to end on the same note. And you will see what that note is. Please continue, Russ.
All right. Well, thank you, Roger. It's an honor to be here, and I could talk for hours on this subject. I'm very passionate about this, and I've collected a lot of information about this. So let me run down my list as quickly and efficiently as possible, but cover as much as I can. I'd like to start with sharing a little bit about my story, because a lot of people share the same story. They were introduced to this topic in a surprising way, in a sudden way. And that's what happened with me. Here's my short story in short, and I will launch into what information I gathered after I started researching this. And as you said, Roger, where this all leads. Where does this all lead? And what's going on at the bottom of all of this? So it started for me. I lived in Jamestown, New York, which is a town in western New York, about an hour from Lake Erie. And one day, all of a sudden, I started experiencing a very strong salty metallic taste in the air. And accompanied with that was very strong headaches. I also had joint pain, muscle pain, fatigue. I couldn't focus. I felt absolutely horrible. My company at that time, my company had 3 employees at the time, and we had an employee meeting scheduled that evening, which I had to cancel and tell them, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't function. I am in so much pain, and something is really wrong. And one of my employees could actually taste what I tasted, but much more subtly. Another employee, my business partner, actually tasted a little bit as well, and the other employee had no sensitivity to it whatsoever, could not taste anything. So one thing that people need to understand is there are greatly varying degrees of sensitivity when it comes to senses of taste and smell, and that may explain why I'm a foodie. I love food. I love a good meal, and I love that. Now I know why, because I have such a sensitive sense of taste and smell. It's a different experience for me than it is with many people. So after this event, immediately as this event was taking place, actually, I looked outside to see what was going on, because to me, it was as if you were spraying aluminum dust and salt into the air. That's what it tasted like to me. And I looked out the window and I saw the strangest thing. Now, I had actually seen this for the previous few months on occasion, but the sky was covered with trails going back and forth across the sky. Now, Jamestown, New York is unique in the sense that it has a very small airport. It does not accept large commercial jets. It can only take small puddle hoppers. So you don't see low-flying jets in that vicinity. The nearest large airport is Erie, Pennsylvania, and the next is Buffalo, 90 miles to the north. So to see low-flying jets, much less trails left in the sky, is extremely rare. Or not extremely rare. Let me take this. This is something I've never experienced. It's something you never see. So I knew something was wrong. So after that, I immediately went online and found out about the concept of geoengineering, chemtrails, as they're commonly called, spraying the sky, and I wanted to look into this further. Now, in my background, I have lived on military bases. I have an airborne ranger in the family. I took flight lessons myself. Most of my family has flown or piloted aircraft. I have traveled across the United States by ground and by air most of my life, usually on a regular schedule. Years ago, I also collected pictures when I was younger of jets and rockets. I could tell you every U.S. fighter, every U.S. rocket. I memorized this stuff as a kid because this was my favorite technology. And in all the thousands and thousands of pictures that I collected of jets, you would never see a trail coming out of a jet engine. And today, or after I soon discovered this, I looked in the sky, and every day on a schedule, these jets would fly crisscross the sky and leave so many trails that eventually it would lead to overcast conditions. Those jets were flying very low. They were large 737s, 747s, DC-9s, all used by the military for tankers and other private organizations as well. Flying very low, leaving trails, and about 20 to 40 minutes every time after they did this, I would begin very quickly to smell and taste the salty metallic taste in the air and would come down with the same symptoms. And other people around me would start to get symptoms like headaches and achy joints and feel very fatigued, even if they couldn't smell this. And to this day, that still persists. I see people experiencing these symptoms even if they don't smell or taste the things that are in the air. And we'll get into symptoms in a minute, because this needs to be made personal, because this affects everybody who breathes. It affects the entire animal kingdom. It affects all plant life, anything that uses soil or air and uses sunlight. It affects everybody. Now, in researching this a little bit, I'm going to try to move along to be efficient and not to take up too much time. In Vietnam, their spraying took place. The concept of spraying the air to accomplish a particular task is not something new. This has been going on for a long time. It happened in Vietnam. It was used to defoil the land. It was used to spread disease or to actually kill people. And this is well known and documented. In Woodstock, we even have jets flying over during some of the more difficult times at Woodstock Festival. We see these videos, and the only reason that we can think of why that might be done perhaps would be to modify behavior. Perhaps was that a concept that was already in play at that time? Nevertheless, we have seen this go on in very isolated situations back in history quite a ways. In fact, there was a man interviewed who is considered the father of modern weather weaponry. This is Ben Livingston. He talked about, this is getting into the field of weather modification. We might ask ourselves, after we look at this happening in history, you might say, well, why would they do this? Well, we know in Vietnam they defoiled the land. They used it as a weapon against people. In Woodstock, we can speculate that maybe it was used for behavior modification to make people tired, apathetic, or to stop acting up or something like that. But it kind of moves on, and it moves us into the realm of what other evidence do we have that this existed, and what other artifacts do we have that this kind of thing was pursued by the government or by the military. You can look on, you can find this information anywhere as well, and I hope people do take the time to look this up if you're in doubt, that there are literally hundreds of patents, and some of these patents deal with methods of generating ice nuclei. Let me read some of these titles to you, in fact. Methods of generating ice nuclei smoke particulates for weather modification and apparatus related. Process and apparatus for the production of intense artificial clouds, fogs, or mists. Another one, and this is these technologies are not new. These concepts of spraying these things in the atmosphere have been around for many decades. Atomizing attachment for airplane engine exhaust. This is where they were specifically talking about using this on airplanes, and there were concepts about of either injecting these particulates, metal particulates, and many are mentioned. Specifically, aluminum is one of the most common into the actual combusted air of the jet, and it would come out, and because the particulates were small enough, they did not interfere with the combustion, and they didn't cause undue wear on the engine parts. Other concepts that were considered in these patents were injecting aerosols or fine metallic particles into the bypass air. This is how a high bypass turbofan works. Is you have about 10 to 15% of the air that goes through the center is combusted, and then there's a large 80 to 90% of the air goes around the outer shroud, which is called bypass air. And with some of the patents dealt with injecting air into the bypass. So as I investigated this further, I found a long history of patents showing that this kind of technology has been investigated by the government, by industry, and by the military literally for decades, almost back to the time of the inception of flight. Now, let's move on to the question of contrails. There's a few more sections I want to cover here. I want to try to move quickly to use your time efficiently for this program. This is a very hot topic because what many people don't realize, and I hope that people listening to this show who have not been exposed to this information before will please investigate this, because this is your money, this is your life, and it is affecting you. Whether you smell or taste it or not, it's in the air right now 24/7 from corner to corner of the United States and in Europe. Are they contrails? There are teams of disinformants that are paid as military contractors to sit behind computers and to try to tell the public, to try to convince the public that these lines we're seeing in the sky are condensation trails. I have had a person call me who his best military friend actually was set up in business as a military contractor with 200 people sitting in a room. And these people created fake Facebook accounts. They set up websites and blogs telling people that these are contrails. They pretend that they're pilots online. They will work behind these desks, create all of these fake accounts, and do anything. Lying, morality, nothing matters. The objective is to convince the public that these are harmless condensation trails. This exists. There's a lot of money allocated for this, and Hillary Clinton even was before Congress in recent years asking for hundreds of millions of dollars. The Council on Foreign Relations also made a reference to the spending of hundreds of millions of dollars in a meeting that we actually have on our website that was allocated for the purpose of convincing people that certain atmospheric problems exist that demand the need for atmospheric spraying. This is right out of their own mouths in their own meetings. So the deeper you dig into this, the more it becomes rock solid. I've had pilots call me personally and say, thank you. Thank you for covering this subject. We don't want to be publicly identified because we're in the industry. We fly jets. We're commercial. Some were commercial, some were cargo, some were hobbyists, and some were military. And they would say to me, thank you for covering this. We appreciate this. We know that these aren't contrails. We've never seen anything come out of high bypass turbofan engines. And by the way, all large jet aircraft today, both military and commercial, use high bypass turbofan engines. Even the old Boeing 707s that originally had low bypass turbofans have been retrofitted with much more efficient high bypass turbofan engines. Pilots have been videotaped talking about this. There's a famous videotaping out there where he recognized, this pilot, commercial pilot, right after a plane landed, said, yes, well, this is a necessary evil, is the quote that he used to describe this. Now, we need to ask ourselves, are these really condensation trails? Do jet engines really produce harmless condensation trails? The answer is 99.99% of the time, no. There is a type of engine called the SPAY 512, and there's a few cousins of this engine which are not in production and have not been in production for a long time. The SPAY 512 is a water injection engine. It was used on the BAC 511s, which are no longer produced. There's about 50 of them flying in Europe right now. And there is a chance that there may be a very short trail when they're flying at altitude or close to it, very, very short trail of ice that's caused by engines during water injection operations. But that is by far the exception to the rule. These are older aircraft, no longer manufactured. The concept of water injection is not used in high bypass turbofans anymore. So 99.99% of the jets you see in the sky will not produce condensation trails. This is why airports don't have huge plumes. And people might say, well, the condensation will only become visible when it freezes. But when you see the videotapes of these incredibly massive plumes, and these jets are flying at low altitudes where the temperature is much too high to cause freezing, this cannot be condensation. In fact, all of the original jets that I saw were flying so low that you could practically read numbers if they had them. But the jets that we see flying are virtually all white or silver unmarked jets. They have no markings. They have no commercial markings. And this is what we've seen, and we've seen their flight patterns. We've seen we've watched their flight patterns. We've done time-lapse photography, and it's just has nothing to do with commercial air traffic, at least in our experience, although there are people out there who are seeing jets that look commercial and may very well be commercial who are producing trails. Nevertheless, we don't have all of this massive amount of water at airports. Another problem we have with the contrail claim is that in many of the videotapes, the close-up video footage we see of these trails have bifurcation. What that means is it looks like two trails with a hollow section in the middle. Now, this is not the case on all the trails, but some of them do exhibit this. And what this shows us is that we have the trails being formed from the bypass airflow. The trail is coming out like in a circular pattern out the back, but the central cone where the condensed fuel is, where you would expect if this process of burning kerosene, jet fuel, did produce large amounts of water vapor, you would expect to see it only from that area. But we don't see that in these photographs. We see it being ejected out through the bypass air in a circular pattern like a donut if you were to look at the engine from the back. What this tells us in these cases, and this is not all jets, but in many of the cases that we photographed, we see that this must be an aerosol injection into the bypass airflow. There is no way otherwise that condensation can form in the bypass air, because the bypass air is bypassed, it's not combusted, it is blown through the engine with a fan. That's why they're called turbo fans, because they're turbine engines that drive a fan. The only difference between, I shouldn't say the only difference, there are many differences, but in concept, the only difference between these engines and a prop engine is that it has a duct around it, and that makes it look really super duper modern. Otherwise, it's just a prop engine. In fact, General Electric was experimenting with very high efficiency engines where they used turbine engines and they had the props on the outside because they were more efficient in some of the cases that they were testing. Didn't catch on yet, but we'll see what happens. Nevertheless, we're seeing these bifurcated trails showing that the bypass air is being injected with condensation. You know, forgetting the fact that many people smell it, many people taste it, many people feel the symptoms who have contacted me. They've seen the flight patterns. They've seen and measured how long the stuff takes to descend to the ground. All of this stuff on top of it just adds to the case. I am so sorry this is taking so long. A few more areas to cover. Cut me off if I need to stop. I'm going to try to rush through this. I don't mean to take more time than I should. I'm sorry. It just, there's so much information to share. We can ask ourselves, is this legal? Let's cover this really quickly. Is this legal? Let me read a quick little piece of Public Law 10585. Anybody can look this up. November 18th, 1997. It's called the Use of Human Subject for Testing of Chemical or Biological Agents. In this, I'm going to try to go fast. I'd love to read this to you, but let me try to go fast. This law, and you would wonder why something like this would be passed unless they had an intent to use this. Think about this. Restrictions on the use of human subjects for testing of chemical or biological agents. Section A, prohibited activities. The Secretary of Defense may not conduct, either directly or by contract, any test or experiment involving the use of a chemical agent or biological agent on a civilian population or any other testing of a chemical agent or biological agent on human subjects. Sounds good so far. Now let's go to Section B, exceptions. Subject to subsection C, D, and E, which I'll get to in a second, the whole prohibition on subsection A does not apply. Okay, this prohibition, meaning you can't spray the people in Section A, does not apply to a test or experiment carried out for any of the following purposes. And they're listed 1, 2, 3. Here are the purposes that are not prohibited as stated in Section A. So it makes Section A completely null and void. Number 1, any peaceful purpose that is related to a medical, therapeutic, pharmaceutical, agricultural, industrial, or research activity. Number 2, any purpose that is directly related to protection against toxic chemicals or biological weapons and agents. Number 3, any law enforcement purpose, including any purpose related to riot control. In other words, they are prohibited from spraying these toxins on the public except for virtually any reason they want to. So one of the exclusions is Section C, which actually says that the people must receive informed consent. There must be informed consent by those who are being sprayed upon. Here, I will cover this very quickly. Informed consent means 2 different things. In regular law, it means something just like it sounds. You must be informed of it, and you must consent to the activity. The problem is that so much of what we call law today is really governed by the Uniform Commercial Code because it is a commercial activity. All of these things are commercial activities. You get a speeding ticket, it's a commercial activity. There's an exchange of money. Why don't you have constitutional rights? Why? I mean, that's a whole nother can of worms because it's a commercial activity. Well, the Uniform Commercial Code says that it implies this, that informed consent is that you publish something, and then as long as it's published and available for public consumption, then if you do not properly protest, then you have consented. So therefore, subsection C, which requires informed consent, if this law is under Uniform Commercial Code, which I believe it is practically meaningless because this law has been published, and if you don't properly, through the proper channels, protest, then you have conceded.
Russ, if you could get to the root of all of this at this point, because we're at the 20-minute mark, not the 10-minute mark.
So, I'm so sorry.
Listen to me. I do understand that you have a very difficult topic to discuss because it's one that probably is the least well understood of all of our topics. But let's bring it down to the root cause of all of this so we can toss the football. If we try to teach everybody everything about every one of these 8 topics, this would have to be a 3-month show, not a 3-hour show. So everything you put out has been absolutely phenomenal. Let's wrap it up with the root cause of all of this. Why is it being done? And who's involved with that?
Okay, looking at the root cause, we can ask ourselves, well, what are they doing? So why are they doing it? And who would be doing such a thing? We're finding aluminum, strontium, mercury, barium, glyphosate, which is Roundup, and other things. All of these things cause numerous diseases in humans and also can defoil the land, kill plants, kill insects, which is exactly what we're seeing today. So who would want to do such a thing? Who profits from sick people? Well, this is kind of a jump to make right now without going through a logical process of leading up to the final point. For some people, it might be quite a jump, but what we have to do is when we do our research, we will realize this. First of all, the spraying activity began in many countries around the world at roughly the same times. Over a period of just a few years, it went from country to country to country. First of all, if you have white or silver unmarked jets covering the sky that don't have transponders, number one, they're military. Number two, your civilian government has given them permission to do this. So they know about it, at least in some level, and they have given permission for this. When we understand that the countries of the world, and I would encourage people to watch a movie called The Corporation Nation, and another movie, you can look these up on YouTube, called All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. You will start to understand that the nations of the world have been sequestered and brought into submission through the banking system, the global banking system, over a long period of time. And you have a group of industrialist bankers. This is what I call them. They're industrialist bankers because they run large industry and they're wrapped up very tightly in the banking industry. And they literally dictate the concept and the policies of government, how government works, what government policies will be. This is the way that the world works. And I encourage people to become educated about that. When these people gain that permission to use this airspace in all of these countries around the world, when you start getting into their heads, and this is one of my favorite things to do, is I love to say, what motivates these people? What are they thinking? What is this all about? Your mind will be blown when you find out what they really believe, what they are really trying to do, what the whole point is. But ultimately, to condense it into a package, they want ultimate control. They monitor the public because they want to quash anyone who comes against them. They want to know your communications. They don't want any surprises. So they'll use fear-mongering. They'll say, we have an enemy like China, Russia, we have terrorists, so therefore we have to monitor all communication. Well, if they control all the countries, what do they need to monitor these things for? What is the foreign threat? It isn't a foreign threat. It's a threat of the truth, a threat that the corruption and the centralization of power that we live under will be exposed. These are the industrialist bankers, as I call them. People may have different names for them. These are the ones who run the Federal Reserve banks of the world. These are the ones who run the large corporations of the world. These are the ones you do not elect. You don't hear their names mentioned as the richest people of the world, yet they control the largest sums of money in the world. These are the people who want you sick. They want your intelligence decreased. They want you to be apathetic, because sick, unintelligent, and apathetic people are very easy to control. That's what we're talking about.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. All right. What I'm going to do is we're going to skip over everybody having something to say about this, and because we're about 25 minutes into this. Let's go to our next topic, and we'll see how we are for time after that. What I do want to do is get through all of these topics and then have a general discussion. And I've got 3 topics to talk about, so I'm probably going to have to use about 20 minutes instead of 10. So
forgive me, Roger. Just forgive me. I'm so sorry.
No.
I went over. I just want to let you. I lose track of time when I talk about this subject. So I'm sorry to everyone for taking that time up.
You, in my eyes, had the most difficult topic to explain, simply because, like I said, it's the one that is probably the least well understood by the general public.
Can I just say something here? That particular part of this show tonight needs to be a standalone, put out to people who want the elevator presentation of chemtrails. That was superb. Thank you.
It was. And what we can do is we can actually have Randy chop that particular part out and make it a presentation all in itself. And I have a feeling we're going to do that with more than one of these. I look at the cast of stars in this group here. All right, so the next person I'm going to go to, and I'm going to try and do this in the order that I introduced you, is going to be the Rebel, and she's going to talk about GMOs. Rebel, take it away, please.
Okay, hello. Can you hear me okay, first of all?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first I want to say again, thank you, Roger. This is an incredible platform to be able to speak out. And GMOs were one of the first things that I personally became aware of. I was horrified at what I had discovered about genetically modified organisms. And that's actually when I started my blog in 2012. It was to expose GMOs and what's called the Big Six. So,
And that's when I met you, actually.
Yeah. Well, I also wanted to say one of the worst things that we can do as a species, besides put profit above people and act as apathetic bystanders, only concerned with our own existences and all that, is to continually judge each other and put each other down, which no one here is doing, but I think we've all seen it in the movement to raise awareness. And like you were saying about ego play and not being able to play in someone else's sandbox and kind of like hoarding information and basically copywriting information. And none of that is any good. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help humanity. And it's just basically ego driven, not getting us anywhere except divided. So, anyway, as we all know, there's a war on humanity. There's a war on all life on this planet, including the very planet itself. Every issue adversely affecting our health and world, from climate engineering to smart meters to the banking system to perpetual warfare and all of its toxic chemicals and biological substances, from Agent Orange to AIDS to Ebola, along with the politics and mainstream media that spreads the propaganda and uses patriotism and various other distractions as tools to divide and conquer us, only promotes wars, not of freedom, but of imperialism. So somehow this cruelty is justified, the mass slaughter and destruction of another part of our globe to take over and dominate the resources, not to mention animal cruelty, laboratory animals that have horrific things done to them in the name of science, and the blatant disrespect of all life in nature, even down to our educational system and indoctrinating our children and teaching kids to merely memorize facts that are basically made up. Most of history is just spun the way that the controlling powers want it to be. Take Thanksgiving, for instance. I'm not going to go on a tangent on that, but I think we all know that's not how it really happened. And so the perpetrators of these crimes against humanity are coming at us in so many areas: our food, our water, our air, our medications, our medicines, vaccines. So I know I'm probably getting a little away from GMOs, but I'm just making the point it's all tied in together. And that's my focus right now, is on GMOs. And despite fierce opposition paid for by the Big Six chemical cartel, the big pesticide, herbicide, agribiotech corporations, the two biggest ones probably are Monsanto and Dow, the makers of DDT. And if people research and read Silent Spring by Rachel Carson from, like a long time ago, they're gonna see the truth about that. And if you look up old vintage commercials of DDT, I think the slogan was "DDT is good for me," and then of course it killed everything and gave everybody cancer, and it was taken off the market pretty much. But we're also talking about Monsanto and Dow, the makers of Agent Orange and 2,4-D. And I think we've all heard the horror stories of how Agent Orange is still adversely affecting people in Vietnam and veterans that were exposed to it, and it's serious. And of course, Monsanto's largest selling.
Well, hold on one second. When you say 2,4-D, most people don't understand that 2,4-D is the active ingredient in Agent Orange, and it's being used, it's being sprayed on our food now. The government has approved that as an insecticide or an herbicide. I'm not exactly which. I think it's as an herbicide. And so the Agent Orange that killed so many people and is still the gift that keeps on giving in Vietnam is now being sprayed on our food in America, compliments of the U.S. government.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was. Thank you, Roger. That's what I was going to, ramping up to. This is the stuff being sprayed on our agriculture products, our food that we eat, in addition to the gene splicing you know, the transgender gene splicing, or I mean, not trans species, I'm sorry. And it's actually not funny, I'm just really nervous. And not to mention the, you know, Roundup and that they're spraying on everything. And you're right, 2,4-D is one of the main ingredients. And the warfare chemicals, Agent Orange, 2,4-D, all that, the byproduct is, one of the byproducts of that is Roundup and some of the other horrific things that they're spraying on GMOs. And they're actually creating the GMO seeds to be resistant to those. So but they end up having to spray even more. So I don't know about you guys, but I never agree to let my food be tainted with toxic substances. And I think it's horrifying. And not to mention the carcinogenic synthetic sweeteners that have been created in the laboratory, like saccharin, high fructose corn syrup, and aspartame, also known as NutraSweet, highly toxic. These things are toxic waste. And this is the founders of GMOs that are making this stuff and controlling our agriculture. And so part of the big six also is Bayer, DuPont, BASF, and Syngenta. And basically these six perpetrators are dominating the agrobiotech market by intimidating, impoverishing, disempowering farmers, jeopardizing true food security, and that genetically engineered seeds failed to deliver as promised, and that is a fact. And the shills that are hired to scour social media and argue with everybody and try to say, oh, they're safe, they're feeding the world, that actually unbiased scientific reports show that they failed to deliver, that they're actually toxic. And if you think about the GMOs, that how they work is that the like the BT corn that provides its own insecticide, when an insect eats into that, it bursts their stomach open, and then they want to actually feed this stuff to humans. I think there's a serious problem with that. And not to mention the cross-contamination that can happen. So organic farming is pretty much a thing of the past. Even farmers that practice organic and sustainable farming, they could get cross-contaminated. And then the ironic thing about that is that they get sued when that happens. And so basically Monsanto and partners there with their seed patents and the legal issues, they have dominated agriculture, and by basically bullying farmers into taking the GMO seeds and forcing them to do so. And we've all heard about the farmers in India that have committed suicide because they were forced to only grow for the GMO seeds, and then they end up killing themselves because they can't provide for their families, and it's really horrible. And for example, also beautiful, pristine Hawaii. I don't know how many people know about this, but I did a blog piece on this about a year and a half ago. The Kamehameha school property, it's vast, and basically Monsanto and Syngenta has turned it into a complete biohazard. They have completely ruined this land and taken it over by planting their GMOs and just spraying these chemicals, 2,4-D, which is Agent Orange, basically, all over the land. They're killing the nature. The residents and the kids that actually attend the schools there, as well as the people that live there, are actually getting cancer and dying from this. There's so many serious issues being spoken about tonight, and all anyone really needs to do is start connecting the dots to the big money, the big controlling elite. For instance, like take a look at the Gates Foundation that promotes itself as also being humanitarian, just like Monsanto feeds the world. Bill Gates is sinking billions of dollars into the very things that are destroying us. He invested $4.5 million into climate engineering research back in 2007, I believe. That, as Russ outlined, is the spewing of several tons of toxic heavy metal nanoparticulates into the atmosphere via aircraft to supposedly block the sun. And we all know that Bill Gates is also the big promoter of vaccines and owns over 500,000 shares in Monsanto. And he's not the only profiteer of poison, but he has become a major player. And as we keep connecting the dots, we find that most things trace back to the United Nations. And according to the UN Conference on Trade and Development, the UNCTAD, corporate concentration of the agricultural input market has far-reaching implications for global food security, as the privatization and patenting of agricultural innovation, gene traits, transformation technologies, and seed germplasm has been replacing traditional natural agricultural practices of seeds, farmers' rights, and breeders' rights. And all anyone really has to do is look up PANNA, Pesticide Action Network North America, that provides detailed information on the unsustainable toxic bio-agri-corporate farming takeovers. And I just have to ask, is it okay with the people out there to let warfare chemical corporations poison your food that you feed your children? Is that okay with you? Because it's not okay with me, and that's why I do what I do. So if you're sick and tired of watching your loved ones suffer from cancer and other illness, inflammatory conditions, and other illnesses, look no further than your food, your medicine, and the air that you're breathing. Nature sustains us, yet corporate greed is destroying nature and poisoning us all. Where's the logic in that? That makes no sense to me. I get really worked up about this. Is more of a rant than a speech, because I cannot believe that as a people we've allowed this to happen. And I know a lot of it's due to the distractions and the indoctrinations and the disinformation, but we have got to come together and form unity, or this planet and all life on it is done for. I'm not even going to sugarcoat that. So anyway, basically, that's what I would like to see: unity, standing together so we can truly affect change. And thank you. I appreciate this platform to speak out.
One of the most evil mechanisms being used against humanity today. Because not only do GMOs adversely, as you so aptly put, affect humanity, it affects the entire biosphere. GMOs cannot be contained. Once a GMO is planted, okay, and a bee comes by, or a butterfly comes by, or the wind blows, to say that you can contain GMOs to a specific plot, we know that's physically impossible, because as you again so aptly put, how many farmers are being sued by Monsanto because the wind cross-pollinates, or bees or whatever cross-pollinate the crops, and they end up with a modified crop. And they end up by either having to give their crop to Monsanto or one of these other biotech companies, or end up in jail. Not only that, but we also know, and I know you didn't have time to bring this up, but one of the biggest evils of GMOs is the epicite gene, which is a gene inserted into genetically modified corn, which has only one purpose, and that is to sterilize. And it was paid for by the government and developed by a biotech company called Epicite in Southern California. Now, since the development of that corn with the epicite gene in it, whether or not any of these GMOs carry the epicite gene in them is information you not only can't find out about, you're not allowed to find out about. United States of America has the highest, or excuse me, the fastest rising level of sterility on the planet. We are the most exposed to GMOs on this planet. Where does coincidence stop off? And it's a fact, jump in. And for everybody who sees me shutting my camera off, I have this huge picture window behind me. And when this thing falls, it just whites out the whole camera. So I have to shut my camera off and try and hook this thing back up. But anyway, yes, GMOs. But it all traces back, as you said, to the same individuals, those who wish to have control over humanity. Control the food supply, you control the population. And this is exactly what we're doing. Control what's coming down from the skies, and you control the attitudes and the health of the population. So now we've tied the geoengineering and the GMOs back to the same game players. All right. I want to step over to Susan. And Susan, you've got a topic that I'm rather eager to hear about all of these, but I'm rather eager to hear what you put together on this. So why don't you please introduce your topic and then jump forward. You have to unmute.
Thank you.
Okay, not a problem.
My topic is perpetual warfare. I just want to make a comment here. During times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. George Orwell. Perpetual warfare is the precipitation and constant state of never-ending and uninterrupted dominance, control, conflict, and chaos over the masses of population, including the absence of law and deprivation at home and on a global scale. Most Americans know that the United States was set up upon Christian Judeo beliefs, whereby law-abiding peaceful people are protected by its government. And this could be no further from the truth, as contradicting facts reveal the shadows of a manipulating body of power that have been eclipsing its very people with the tools of war at every facet of life's existence. This albatross portrays an obtuse facade with its consummate lust for reckless authority, control, and greed. Calculating and provocative agendas mutate by the directives and change and rearrange to fit the elite by internal and international decrees, treaties, charters, contracts that compromise infrastructure for global control of resources, which include one of the most sacred, the freedoms and liberties of the human race. The world as we know it is an enigma with a constant state of within a constant state of metamorphosis. War is the balance of the system to keep the elite on top. Such criminal acts against humanity committed by the 1% of the world's population who live above the laws as they create these very laws to protect them, as they commit these acts and crimes against the 99% of mankind. Some of these crimes include in the following, yet not limited to: propaganda and extortion, full spectrum dominance, central banking institution stock manipulation, military-industrial complex, enemy combatants, political tyranny, mainstream media and public relations, government and sanctions, genocide and apartheid, international drug and gun trafficking networks, permanent war on all fronts, physical, social, economic, poverty, job loss, fear, fraud, lost hope, shock and awe, surveillance and data mining, control of natural resources and raw materials, food and water supplies, genetically engineered foods, big pharma, vaccines, health and human services, laboratory-created diseases, false sciences, global warming, chemtrails, international conglomerates, energy monopolies, environmental conservation organizations. Technology has progressed from conventional, biological, and chemical weapons and mass destruction to nanotechnologies, DNA manipulations, silent warfare of computers, smartphones, smart home devices, smart meters, which is the new science of frequency and energy manipulation. Through the elite sinister plot of dismantle, these architects of demise and psychopaths have misjudged the hearts and minds of the common man. We are not particles of cannon fodder, whereby the elite classify the masses. Our moral compass has grown more disciplined in thought and in deed, as we monitor their history of abstract agendas. Our knowledge has gained a newfound power. Mankind is awakening from their deep slumber built on generations of false hope and belief systems. Our founding fathers were weary of foreign alliances and wars on foreign soils, knowing that this would strip away our sovereign rights and freedoms. It will take the unification of mankind in numbers where we lack in dollars to defeat the machine that is in the quest of dehumanizing the existence of the masses. It is my belief that it's not too late for healing of humanity. Through communication and unification, restoration can be reborn. And I didn't want to go on too much because everybody, it's all the same. I mean, Rebel just got done saying exactly parts of this, what I spend time writing. It's all connected. These people are the military-industrial complex, the bankers, the corporate suits, and more, the 1% of the population.
Agreed. And what we're looking at today is something that I spent a great deal of my life helping to facilitate. And everybody who's listened to the show has heard me say this before. I spent 3 decades working for the military-industrial complex, facilitating DoD contracts. And I was one of those people who woke up every morning believing that everything my government did and everything that the military of my government did was necessary and was right. And today, and for the last almost 5 years now, I have set myself on a path of atonement because I helped to facilitate that structure. And everybody in this group has gone through an awakening. Mine was very, very, very stark. My entire awakening took less than a couple of weeks, whereas most people, as Randy so eloquently put on a show we did about a month and a half ago, his took place over years. Mine took place over literally a couple of weeks. So yes, we are all saying something that interconnects. And that's the whole reason of this show. Yes, we're talking about perpetual warfare. Yes, we're talking about GMOs. Yes, we're talking about geoengineering. But the point here of this show is to show the interconnectivity of all of them. They're not, okay, individual concepts. This is a war being waged against humanity. And as I put into my opening statement, you don't go into a war with a pistol. You go into a war with a pistol, a rifle, a machine gun, a battleship, a bomber. You go into a war with multiple weapons to attack the enemy from every direction and give him no means of escape. This is what's being perpetrated on humanity. And America is the biggest target in the crosshairs. And I will finish up with that. But I'd like to jump in and let my good friend Steve put his topic forward, because I really do want to get through these topics, because I believe that the discussion that's going to follow these topics is going to be much, much more, it's going to bring out our actual thoughts. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, political tyranny is something that is experienced worldwide because, as Randy mentioned before, there's a cabal. The cabal I refer to often as the power brokers, the people that have so much influence in the world that they can take any politician and bureaucrat and make them bend to the will of the elite. The elite has one set of policies that benefits them. And if any politician, power broker, or any politician, bureaucrat, or individual goes against those policies, the threats come out and they get people to bend. So with political tyranny, as we look around the world, you see the toilings and groanings of mankind, and it's apparent that political tyranny is commonplace. There's no area of the world that is without it, because relative to this, I have a paraphrase from an oft-quoted scripture. It's Matthew 18:20 in the King James Version. It says, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them." And my paraphrase is this: for wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in the name of anything, there will be politics. And therefore, politics is universal, and you can't escape from it. There's always people that want to assert power, influence, control, gather wealth, dominate. There's this desire, common desire around the world to dominate. So political tyranny is everywhere. We can't escape it, but we need to do things about it where we can as a population, as a people that are aware that this exists. Political tyranny is the result of the apparent universal desire of individuals to control their surroundings, including people, and acquire wealth and power. This is done by reducing risk through exerting undue influence over their fellow citizens of the world. The risk reduction is achieved by asserting the greatest level of control possible over people and institutions, both political and non-political. As a result of this, every person around the world feels the effects of political tyranny, both overt and covert. Publics everywhere are aware of this, and in many cases, painfully aware. One huge issue is that while political tyranny is often overt, and people are quite aware of it, there is political tyranny that is covert and is in place to exert a false narrative and false legal argument. It assumes that the world needs one group of people to guide the people of the world efficiently and maintain peace and harmony of all people, while this group asserts authority over the preponderance of wealth worldwide. It is well documented that the elitists across the globe, led by the oligarch families of Europe and some new upstarts who have amassed lesser amounts of wealth, power, and influence, such as the Rockefellers and the Carnegies here in America, and other upstarts in Japan, Russia, and China, are building momentum to make this happen sooner than people think. And as has been mentioned by other people so far, this is a reality. It is happening soon, and a lot sooner than people think, even a lot of people in the Patriot movement. Once the power brokers have their one world government in place and their utopia of the new world order, and for all intents and purposes, control the wealth of the world, they will in fact claim ownership effectively of most of that wealth. In fact, probably more than 90% of the wealth of the world, probably even more than 90% of the wealth of the world is going to be claimed by the elite. Financial records of the top wealthiest families of the elites, and that's not just the families of the world, because the ones that are in the Forbes wealthiest families are only the ones who have the big egos and want people to know how much money they have. The real wealthy people of the world don't want you to know who they are. So the financial records of the top wealthiest families of the elites shows that this is already the case. So if people think that this is going to happen sometime far into the future, forget about it. It's already done. They're just going to increase that percentage to get as close to 100% as they can. They will need a servant population to service their empire, and that would be us. We would be the servants. So what's a servant in that kind of circumstance? Well, nothing more than a slave, actually. When so much emphasis is put on power, wealth, prestige, and influence, you know that egos are out of control. There will be those at all the levels of the hierarchy below the top positions of the elites that will not be content with their share and their status. Infighting will result in a myriad of internal conflicts, death, and destruction. Warfare and murder will not cease in their utopia. And in fact, the insidious nature of it will be magnified because it will be distilled and concentrated into the one world power structure. This is the epitome of evil extracted and concentrated to the nth degree, as if it is an essential oil, only this is an evil essential oil of untold horror. Just think of the Holocaust in Germany magnified beyond human comprehension. This is already happening as the elites are fighting among themselves as to how to get the job done to establish the New World Order. Actually, history bears witness to the truth of this happening from the inception of the notion of control of the world. Let's examine some definitions that bear on this discussion. Because a lot of times we find, and I've talked to Roger about this lately with people that we know that have been incarcerated, the feds and the elites like to make up their own definitions as they go so that they can jail people and get them off the street, take them out of the operation of trying to keep freedom alive in the world. So we go to Black's Law Dictionary. What is tyranny? Arbitrary or despotic government, the severe and autocratic exercise of sovereign power, either vested constitutionally in one ruler or usurped by him by breaking down the division and distribution of governmental powers. So what is a tyrant then? Going to the Law Dictionary definition of tyrant taken from Black's Law Dictionary, a despot is a sovereign or ruler, legitimate or otherwise, who uses his power unjustly and arbitrarily to the oppression of his subjects. Have we ever seen that in history? Do we even see that today here in America? My answer would be definitely yes to that. A tyrant, the chief magistrate of the state, whether legitimate or otherwise, who violates the Constitution to act arbitrarily contrary to justice. Another definition would be the term tyrant and usurper are sometimes used as synonymous because usurpers are almost always tyrants. Usurpation is itself a tyrannical act, but properly speaking, the words usurper and tyrant convey different ideas. A king may become a tyrant, although legitimate, when he acts despotically, while a usurper may cease to be a tyrant by governing according to the dictates of justice. And a third definition, this term is sometimes applied to persons in authority who violate the laws and act arbitrarily towards others. So you have despotism and oppression. And these citations is mentioned from Black's Law Dictionary, and also a law dictionary adapted to the Constitution and laws of the United States by John Bouvier, and that was published in 1856. The definition of politics, and this is interesting because it goes to what we would consider the baser elements of human nature, although one would think, okay, politics is a big deal, you know, what could be bad about that definition? But as you'll see, it actually addresses the baser politic or part of the human nature as an emphasis. And the definition is the activities associated with the governance of a country or other area, especially the debate or conflict among individuals or parties having or hoping to achieve power. So one would be the activities of governments concerning the political relations between countries. 2, activities within an organization that are aimed at improving someone's status or position and are typically considered to be devious or divisive. And 3, often the politics of. The assumptions or principles relating to or inherent in a sphere, theory, or thing, especially when concerned with power and status in a society. And those definitions come from the Oxford University Press. So you see that even in the common definition of politics, it basically centers on the base element of human nature, as I mentioned before. The points made in the second paragraph, as I mentioned it when we started, the definitions in the Oxford Dictionary, which are in agreement with other dictionaries that were consulted, shows that there's pretty much uniformity throughout people that publish dictionaries, that this really is in fact the case. You know, we're not just making this stuff up because we're patriots. The horror that patriots would actually try to become knowledgeable about definitions. And then as one goes back through world history, the struggle for dominance of individuals and families over others is apparent. Wealth, status, prestige, power, and influence are paramount. In the emergence of medieval Europe, a small group of oligarch families became dominant. The House of Habsburg, the House of Guelph, the House of Rothschild from the medieval countries of Europe. The Rothschilds became preeminent in banking, and that accounts for their significant interest in all the central banks of the world and is also the source of their great power and influence. Because as we know, he who controls the money controls just about everything. During the Middle Ages, European power centers coalesced into two camps. And this is where basically politics has been throughout history of man. And like I said in the beginning, for whoever two or three are gathered in the name of anything, there's going to be politics. But during the Middle Ages, European power centers coalesced into two camps, the Ghibellines and the Guelphs, which were Italian. The Pope aligned himself with the Guelphs against the Ghibellines, resulting in victory for the Guelphs. All of modern history stems directly from the struggle between these two powers, between these two political powers. So keep in mind politics. The Guelphs were also called the Black Guelphs and Black Nobility. Every subsequent coup d'etat, revolution, and war has centered in the battle of the Guelphs to hold and enhance their power, which is now the world order. The power of the Guelphs grew through their control of banking and international trade. And this comes from Dr. Webster Griffin Tarpley and James Higham in their book, The Venetian Black Nobility and the Concept of Oligarchy. And I got that citation from a website, which is a real great website to get sort of like the just quick notes about how all these things about power and the elites and warfare and all these things are related. They just have like sound bites of information that show you where to go to look these things up in greater detail. So that website is realworldorder.net. So if you go to realworldorder.net, they have, like I say, it's a veritable soundbite about just about everything to do with politics, warfare, and how all these elites are connected. Lord Alfred Milner, a wealthy Englishman and frontman for the Rothschilds, served as paymaster for the international bankers during the Bolshevik Revolution. Milner later headed the secret society known as the Round Table, which was dedicated to establishing a world government whereby a clique of super-rich financiers would control the world under the guise of socialism. The American subsidiary of this conspiracy is called the Council on Foreign Relations and was started by and is still controlled by international bankers. The secret society was organized on the conspiratorial pattern of circles. The central part of the secret society was established by March 1891 using Cecil Rhodes' money. And that's Cecil Rhodes of the Rhodes Scholarship money. And he was an extremely wealthy, powerful, and influential person in England and sought to have the crown reestablish itself as ruler over the world. But they're actually duking it out with the Pope, as we know from the Guelphs and the Black whatever's from that group. So the organization was run for Rothschild by Lord Alfred Milner. The Round Table worked behind the scenes at the highest levels of British government, influencing foreign policy and England's involvement and conduct of World War I. And this came from Gary Allen in his book, None Dare Call It Conspiracy. How dare we, the patriots, call anything a conspiracy? We're just trying to incite people to be wrathful and rebel and come against the real criminals of the world. Perish the thought that we should come after the real criminals of the world. The Club of Rome reported to the Committee of 300, at whose head sits the Queen of England. Her Majesty rules over a vast network of closely linked corporations who pay no taxes and are answerable to no one, who fund their research institutions through foundations whose joint activities almost totally control our daily lives. And notice so far, Roger and rest of the panelists, we haven't really talked about too much about the American government. Oh, gee, I wonder why that is. Well, I think we're going to find out a little bit more as we go here. These linked institutions and their leading personnel form an upper-level parallel government that controls the lives of every American, whether they know it or not. This is what happens. Together with the interlocking corporations, insurance companies, banks, finance corporations, the mega oil companies, newspapers, magazines, radio, television, broadcasting, these companies make up a vast apparatus that sits astride the United States and the world. So this is why we don't have to talk about the American side of the politics so much, because they're under the thumb of the cabal, as Randy mentioned before, and I like to call the power brokers. There is not a politician in Washington, D.C. who is not somehow beholden to it, and that is the Queen of England, the Club of Rome, and the Committee of 300. And this came from John Coleman in his book, The Committee of 300, The Conspirators' Hierarchy. And that came from the website realworldorder.net. Political tyranny, therefore, seeks to establish complete dominance and control over people throughout government. To maintain the control, there is to be absolute control over money and banking, political institutions, and people. These things are protected by control over courts, the military, commerce, and the media. Mass deception and fraud are used to control citizens, along with coercion through lawful enforcement in the courts. Well, I shouldn't say lawful enforcement because a lot of it's not lawful, but it's legal enforcement, because some things can be made legal by our Congress, but they aren't lawful. And people need to become aware of the distinction of it with regard to that. With the advent of the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, the USA has effectively become a police state. If so desired, a citizen can be arrested and held without charges for an indefinite period, with evidence being permitted to be classified as secret. So under the NDA, for the listeners, if the government doesn't want you to know why you're being held, they don't have to tell you, because all of a sudden, all that evidence is now classified secret, and you can't know just because they say so. Recently arrested were Patriots Robert Doggart from Tennessee, and in a separate case, Thomas Deegan of West Virginia. Both had a charge of the threat of terrorism. But the feds and the state law enforcement were making up their own definitions. Deegan was arrested without warrants, technically kidnapping, 3 times, and his house searched without warrants 4 times. Actually, Deegan hasn't gone to court yet over his matters, but Doggart has, and when he held the court to the strict definitions of terms, he made some serious headway in his case to be let go of the charges that were made against him. The Supreme Court and lower level courts, both federal and state, are now operating where a favorite statement of the judge in that court is that the court is his and he can order whatever he wants to have done. The court belongs to the people, not the judge, and a jury can judge the law in a case and determine it to be unlawful. That's jury nullification. Judges refuse to notify juries of this fact. Michael School on the West Coast in California, he has a website called Citizens, plural, Action, Networks, plural. Thomas Deegan at hudoc.info and others that we know have been told that they can't record proceedings in a hearing and that the Constitution doesn't matter in hearings on their cases. Deegan found in an instructional manual on law that said the following, and this is paraphrased by me: the rights, privileges, and benefits of the law are only for those who educate themselves in the law and learn how to use it. So this is a law manual telling people that they need to become virtually lawyers or attorneys themselves in order to have the rights and privileges that we're supposed to have just by virtue of being a citizen in a free country. Now, how do you like that? I mean, so much of this stuff just goes beyond the pale.
What you're bringing up is absolutely mind-bending, especially the two cases I've been involved in. But in order to be able to finish all of this by the end of the show, I'm going to have to ask you to expedite just a little bit, please, Steve.
All right. Let's see. Well, that was about it. That was it right there. Well, then we have the case that, recently we saw in the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Roberts rewrites the law or something that has been passed as legislation so that it becomes what they want it to be. Now, the Supreme Court justices are not supposed to be rewriting legislation. I mean,
no.
So much of this stuff just goes so far beyond. It's a killer.
But what you did was you did tie a lot of the power structure, which everything we've discussed to this point leads back to. It leads back to that power structure. And when you talk about the wealth of families, let me drop a bombshell on a lot of people listening. Then I want to pass this over to Randy, because we all suffer from the economy at this point, and Randy's going to blow that apart for us. But let me tell you a little bit about the wealth of families. The wealth influence of the Rothschilds on this planet encompasses a monetary value that exceeds $110 trillion. One family, the Rothschild family, $110 trillion plus. The entire debt of every nation on this planet combined is approximately plus or minus $50 trillion. The Rothschilds could pay off the national debt of every country on this planet and still have better than half of the largest fortune ever accumulated by a single family left over. That's an accumulation of power and wealth, which you define so eloquently. And I thank you, Steve. Randy, I've been just itching to hear you talk about the economy, because we live in a country that the world was jealous of for about a century. We had an industrial revolution that spawned immigration from across the planet to this country, because this was the place to go to make your fortune. This was a place to go to raise a family. This was the place to go to have freedom, to make a decent living, to make your mark, leave your mark on the world. And we have seen that implode more so since the turn of the century than ever in the history of this country. So I'm going to take off the halter and let you run free, my friend.
I think my job's made easier by those who have come before me tonight, because we can run through this real quick. And as a talk show host, dealing with multiple subjects, sometimes multiple guests, my job is to nutshell information. It's called research for a reason, because it's not really a search, it's research. So fortunately, a lot of my work's done for me. A lot of what I'm going to present here in what is going to hopefully be a short time is available readily online, and most of it is available under the banner of one website, which is anticorruptionsociety.com. And so this will obviously... all this information can be found open source on the web. It doesn't rely on my ability to, quote, research or to present. We'll begin with the beginning salvo goes early in our history, which says if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their money, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until their children will wake up homeless. I think, given the financial collapse of 2008, 2009, we've seen far too many families in America who have woken up with their children homeless and people living in the street. Following is kind of a timeline demonstrating when and how a private central banking cartel got control of the people and the assets of the United States. Each one of the facts is supported by official sources, and the source documents, as I said, are available at anticorruptionsociety.com. We go through this real quick. This is a timeline. 1913, with the passage of the Federal Reserve Act, a private foreign banking cartel was made the fiscal agent of the United States. That comes from Representative Lewis McFadden on the congressional record in June 1932. From the website of the Federal Reserve Bank, the entry of the United States into World War I added to the responsibilities of the young Federal Reserve Bank. Oh, poor baby. It helped finance U.S. military expenditures by, quote, becoming the fiscal agent of the federal government. 1920, the Congress handed the U.S. Treasury over to the same private banking cartel via the Independent Treasury Act. The Independent Treasury Act of 1920. Again, all of this is documented. All of it is open source. All of it is online. The Council on Foreign Relations was founded to, quote, direct the media. Paul Warburg was its first director. Paul Warburg also drafted the Federal Reserve Act and became the Fed's first governor. Paul Warburg was an agent for the Rothschild banking dynasty. 1925, the United States Corporation Company was chartered in perpetuity in Florida by its fiscal agent. And that comes from Articles of Incorporation, the United States Corporation Company. This company was created without the approval of Congress nor the knowledge and authority of the American people. Note, in 1925, the Federal Reserve Board of New York had offices on Cedar Street and on Broadway, both cited in the Articles of Incorporation. The United States Corporation Company created a maximum of 100 shares of stock. The Articles of Incorporation reveal only the names of 3 individuals who held 5 shares. The other shareholders were not identified. So much for disclosure, eh? 1920s, the U.S. Treasury was raided by the private Federal Reserve banksters, who then caused the Great Depression and bankrupted the United States Corporation Company. Again, Representative Lewis McFadden in the Congressional Record of 1932. 1933, we come into the nexus here. A state of emergency was claimed, and Congress gave the president unconstitutional emergency powers. Congressional Record, March 1933. On behalf of the private Federal Reserve, President Roosevelt confiscated the people's gold and forced all of us to use Federal Reserve notes from that point forward. Congressional Record, March 1933. The Federal Reserve is a private corporation, therefore their notes are a privately owned currency. The people and property of the United States was hypothecated and placed unlawfully in a public trust. This comes from Representative James Traficant in the Congressional Record, March 1993. Sorry about that. And by the way, for his trouble in reporting this fact, Representative Traficant was expelled from Congress, charged with, quote, using campaign funds for personal use, unquote.
And sent to prison.
And he was drummed out of Congress and convicted and imprisoned for 7 years in Allenwood Federal Penitentiary. The term hypothecate means to pledge as security without delivery of title or possession. Think about that for a minute. The Internal Federal Revenue Service was chartered in Delaware as a private corporation. It is not a division of the U.S. Treasury. Internal Revenue Service Charter, 1933. The United States is a private corporation with unnamed stockholders. A private corporation is its fiscal agent. A private corporation owns and circulates the currency we are forced to use. A private corporation expects us to pay them taxes. The U.S. CEO, the president, has maintained unconstitutional emergency power for the past 80 years. That is Senate Report 93-549, 1973. The continuation of the National Emergency Act 2012 to 2013, respect to persons who commit, threaten to commit, or support terrorism. You can look that document up at the whitehouse.gov site. Quote, all United States offices, officials, and departments are now operating within a de facto status, in name only, under emergency war powers, with the constitutional republic form of government now dissolved. Again, Representative Trafficant in the Congressional Record, 1993. Today, as has been demonstrated, the United States is just a corporate franchised network represented by their all caps names, such as the state of Ohio. Corporate statutes have replaced laws. A corporate statute is a rule of a corporation given the force of law by the consent of the parties. This consent generally requires a signed contract. Judge Dale, author of The Great American Adventure. The federal and state governments are not real. They are privately owned corporations called governments, and the law is nothing more than their corporate regulations called statutes. As corporations have no souls to save nor bodies to incarcerate, they are just dead legal structures. A dead legal structure cannot represent living people nor obligate living people to laws. Therefore, a corporation cannot be a government. It can only be a legal structure for commercial contracts, which is all the so-called United States government franchise network is. Again, Judge Dale's The Great American Adventure. All of this deception is compounded by the refusal of ordinary Americans to realize how or understand that it is this secrecy and duplicity of privately owned corporations being surreptitiously portrayed as American agencies and government that have come together to fleece the American people. One final closing here is the sobering fact of where we are today. The promise of the Federal Reserve to stabilize the economic system after the crashes that plagued the country in the 1890s through to 1909, which precipitated the events leading to the formation of the Federal Reserve, have left the following facts worth noting. The public debt of January 1855 was $2,547,707,201.25. Back in those days, we could still count cents. Today, it is, visualize the zeros here, 18 trillion, 407 billion dollars. The debt per citizen is $57,197. The debt per taxpayer, and remember, the government qualifies you as a taxpayer under certain situations, is $154,587. Now, look at those numbers again, because there's something in those numbers that's a tell as well. Only 1/3 of our population are carrying the debt load of the rest of America, which is quickly being populated now with foreign nationals who are not productive citizens and cannot carry the debt load because they were never part of this original franchise. Hence, we have the perpetual hamster wheel of debt that all of us in the United States now suffer under, who are carrying the debt load and the money load. Again, this is tyranny. It is part of the federal system, and it follows what my colleague Steve was talking about earlier, outlined in the scriptures, 1 Timothy 6:10, for the love of money is the root of all evil. Again, the amass of power and the continual onslaught of financial tyranny has laid the axe to the tree of liberty. And these are facts that the American people need to stand up and soberly recognize.
Wow. You know, you always live up to the praise that I spread about you. That was very well delivered, very concise. Actually, everything that everybody has put out has been really, really good. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to speak of what I consider to be the three biggest health threats in this country. And now we've tied basically GMOs, which is a health to the entire, a danger to the entire biosystem. We've talked about political tyranny. We've talked about economic tyranny. We've talked about the massacre of the biosphere due to geoengineering. And all of these do in some way have an effect on health, especially the geoengineering and the GMOs. If you don't think that economic tyranny and political tyranny and perpetual warfare don't have an effect on your health, they do. Because if you are a constantly under stress society, it does show through in health symptoms within that society. But now we're going to talk about three things that are actually really putting the health and the future continuation and proliferation of the American society in direct danger. And these are all tied back to the same thing. As everybody here is so eloquently put, it's all tied back to the power brokers, the elitists, the families who rule, however you wish to put it, okay? They are the root of all of these issues. What I'm about to speak of is absolutely no different. Absolutely no different. So again, what I'm going to speak to are three topics: big pharma, vaccines, which we split off for a specific reason, and fluoride. Okay. So let's jump into that because I really want to get to an open conversation before we run out of time here. First off, I want to tell everybody here that a lot of the people in the Patriot movement do not even consider health issues. But the Liberty Beacon, which is our flagship website for the Liberty Beacon Project, 60% of the traffic to our flagship website, the Liberty Beacon, is related to three topics. Okay, 60%. That's big pharma, vaccines, and fluoride. And if you throw GMOs in there and geoengineering, you're talking 70 to 75% of the traffic. So what we are aware of, and we have a good cross-section of individuals from not only around the United States, but we have websites in many other countries who do visit the Liberty Beacon website. We do understand that this is a true barometer of what people are truly concerned about. So health issues are top on their list in most cases. Okay, I can live with a little bit of tyranny, at least I can live. But if you take my health away, I can't live at all. So it's not, it comes down to which is the lesser of two evils. So let's start with big pharma, okay? Corruption, complicity, complacency, greed, agenda, station. This is what dominates our healthcare system today, and exactly what has brought America to this sad state of health. The undisputed sickest society on planet Earth in a period of about 3 generations. Now, for all of you who don't believe this and don't believe just how concerned individuals have been about the big pharmaceutical industry or the pharmaceutical industrial complex for those 3 generations, let me tell you something you've probably never heard of before. 50 years ago, Eisenhower ended his presidency with his famous farewell address to the nation. And we all remember this. We've seen it many, many times on the internet, on television, on documentaries. Okay, a live broadcast where he warned of the unwarranted influence sought by the military-industrial complex, a threat that still exists today, but on a much higher level. But what you don't know is that in the final 60 seconds of his farewell address, a segment that was censored, literally clipped off, Ike issues an ominous second warning, a warning most Americans never heard, especially those who didn't see it live. which most of them are dead today because they'd be my age, or they have cancer, or they're in old folks' homes, or whatever. Okay? The warning that he gave at the end of his speech, the final segment, the threat that he warns of and has been kept under wraps, hidden in the archives of government buildings, the threat of the medical industrial complex or big pharma. Gee, I wonder why. Let's go forward and you might find out. Today, regulatory decisions by the FDA, CDC, USDA, EPA, etc., are based, excuse me, almost exclusively on the wants, needs, and desires of large mega corporations, of which the CDC, the USDA, the FDA, the EPA are all privately owned corporations, as Randy alluded to so eloquently. These are firms whose top officials serve on government panels with obvious conflicts of interest. Firms that provide billions a year in financial contributions to politicians from both major parties and the president. And firms that the government allows to hide or override scientific findings indicating that their products either don't perform as advertised or are harming the public with dangerous side effects. One of the biggest killers in America today, for many years running, is the death by FDA approved pharmaceutical drugs. Let me repeat that. One of the biggest killers in America today, and for many years running, is the death by FDA approved pharmaceutical drugs. Okay? About 300 people a day, about 110,000 people per year, well over 1 million deaths in the last decade alone. In comparison, let's talk about guns. How many deaths per year? 11,000 deaths by homicide and about 21,000 deaths by suicide, for a total of about 32,000 deaths per year by firearms. Both mechanisms are supposedly there to help you survive. A gun to protect you, drugs to keep you healthy. Okay? But one is doing almost 4 times as much damage, causing 4 times as much death. So if they're trying very, very hard to take our guns because they're so damn dangerous, why are they not wanting to take our FDA-approved prescription drugs away from us? Tell me the sanity in that. How many of our children are slapped onto dangerous psychotropic or psychiatric drugs at the drop of a hat? In most cases, for acting like a kid. And if you push back, CPS or Child Protection Services will be at your door in a heartbeat to rip your child from your arms, never to return that child to your home. I have personally written and done radio shows on this that number at least 100. One of the biggest issues we suffer today is parental rights and the state's right to control what your child can and cannot do and take away your parental rights. When it comes to prescription drugs, if your child looks a little depressed and goes to a counselor, if your child looks a little antsy and goes to the counselor, and a psychiatrist prescribes psychotropic or psychiatric drugs, you can bet your bottom dollar you better jump on board, because if you push back, the chances of you losing your child are very high in America today. Okay, remember, cures are not profitable, but continually treating symptoms is very profitable. And we're talking about the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, firms owned or controlled by a global elitist caste hell-bent on control of humanity. We know for a fact that the pharmaceutical industry, and this is why I wanted to finish up with these topics, exercises the most control over this government of any entity on this planet, any commercial entity on this planet. Why can I say that? If you ask most people today, which industry exercises the most influence over our government, 95% or approximately 95%, will immediately say the military-industrial complex because of all of the wars and the hostilities we're involved in across this planet. Nothing could be further from the truth. The pharmaceutical industry spends 500% more than the military-industrial complex does on buying and owning the U.S. government. 500% more than the military-industrial complex. Stop and think about that. So now let's go to vaccines. Okay? So let's take a little bit more defined look at the pharmaceutical industry and focus on the vaccination program in America. This goes a long way towards explaining the possible motivations for actions of those responsible for administrating it. Slowly but steadily, the veil of lies and false promises being pushed back, and the light of truth is becoming apparent when it comes to vaccines. And this is on a global scale. Okay, everything I'm going to talk about, all the tyranny I'm going to talk about, is happening across the globe. But just like everything else we discussed, GMOs, political tyranny, okay, economic tyranny, geoengineering, all of these things we have discussed so far, America suffers the highest level of exposure. We are literally in the crosshairs. Well, when I tell you that America, pharmaceutical industry, is the most drugged society on the planet by a huge margin, believe it. And when I tell you that America is the most vaccinated society on this planet, please believe it. I never say anything I can't back up. See, science is for sale in America today. And nowhere is this more readily apparent than the pharmaceutical industry and the vaccine schedule. The almighty dollar is the navigator of this massive ship of American healthcare. And it is by far the pharmaceutical industry that influences or outright controls the very course of this vessel. The pharmaceutical lobby, as I stated, spends 5 times more capital than any entity, including the military-industrial complex, does, influencing Congress to do their bidding. And when you control our leaders through promise, bribery, or threat, you in fact control our health, especially if you are the pharmaceutical industry. Parents of vaccine-damaged or deceased children are put through a cacophony of obstacles and hoops they must jump through for any recognition of damage. And justice is still often never forthcoming. The total immunity, listen to me, the total immunity from prosecution of all, from the production process through the administration, from the manufacturing through the doctor who gives you that shot of vaccinations in America, makes conscience all but unnecessary for all within this process. Why do you need a conscience if you're never going to be held accountable? And this is the state of the vaccine industry in America today. You cannot sue, even if you can prove that a vaccine was faulty and killed your child, your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your uncle, your nephew, your niece. You can never sue any pharmaceutical company for that damage. The officially stated science behind vaccines, although never actually proven, fact, never actually proven in any long-term study conducted by this government, is not even questioned, regardless of the fact that countless peer-reviewed studies prove unequivocally their inefficacy or outright harm. It would seem that all of this influence proclaiming the miracle or benevolence of vaccines is bought and paid for. It not only seems that, it is that. Today, any manufacturer of vaccines has total immunity, okay? Any immunity from being sued for the failure of their product, even though so much evidence points blatantly and so many whistleblowers have come forward to point out the fact that the government and the pharmaceutical companies have lied about the efficacy and the benevolence of the vaccines, okay? Even though so much evidence blatantly points to their massive negative impact on the health of the American society. Aluminum, mercury, MSG, formaldehyde, live viruses, all in their own right, either neurotoxic or excitotoxic. all extremely dangerous or deadly to the human physiology, all directly injected into the human body of us or our vulnerable children. The lie. We are constantly told by our doctors, this is the biggest lie you hear, okay? We're constantly be told by our doctors, the chances of you or your child suffering vaccine damage are far less than 1 in a million. So let's put that to the test. How rare can vaccine damage actually be? Approximately 30,000 VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Reporting System, approximately 30,000 reports are turned into VAERS annually or filed annually. And again, the CDC, which is basically in charge of our vaccine schedule in this country, states that only listen to me, 1 to 10% of the actual cases of vaccine damage are ever reported due to the parents' ignorance or the recipient's ignorance of what constitutes vaccine damage. So now the CDC, who runs the vaccine schedule, states that only 1 to 10% of vaccine damage cases are actually reported each year, but 30,000 cases are reported. Yeah, do the math, okay? If we use the high end, the 10%, the actual number of vaccine damage cases in this country every year is 300,000. If we use the CDC's own number, it could be as much as little as 1%. Actual cases of vaccine damage in this country per year, 3 million cases of vaccine damage every year. These are statistics you can find right on the CDC's own website. I don't make anything up. 1 to 10%, okay? Which means could be as many as 300,000, worst case scenario, 3 million cases of the most benevolent, the world-saving product called vaccines. That much damage done every year, okay? Now, not all of these are life-threatening, but let's say, are they life-wrecking, okay? Are they something that cripples you for life if they don't take your life? Are they something that gives you a chronic disease for life? Are they something you're going to end up by suffering for the rest of your life as a result of? Okay, if even 10 to 20% of that 3 million or that 300,000 are life-threatening or wrecking or stealing, that number could easily exceed 500,000, okay? 500,000 per year. Serious life-threatening reactions per year. This is a huge number. And magnitudes above the, quote, 1 in a million or less, the doctor tells you. When you bring your small infant child in to be vaccinated, and you look at that doctor with that compassionate look in your eye and ask him, what are the chances of these vaccines harming my child? And 95% or better of the time, you're going to hear the chances are less than 1 in a million. Well, let me explain to you. I just told you that it could be as bad as 3 million a year. We know that VAERS and the CDC reports 30,000 a year, but the middle number there is probably the most accurate number, 300 to 500,000 cases of vaccine damage a year. Now, if this lie your doctor tells you of less than 1 in a million chance of your child being damaged were true, let me explain something to you. There's 320 million Americans in this country, of which only 4 to 6 million of us are vaccinated every year, okay? If 1 in a million was even close to true, that would mean out of 320 million people, vaccine damage would not exist in more than 320 people in this country on any given year. Now, VAERS themselves, the CDC themselves, tells you that number is 30,000 reports a year and tells you that number may only represent 1 to 10% of actual vaccine damage. Are you starting to hear the lie here? But you don't hear this. And if you don't know to go looking for it, you're never going to find it. Okay? Those people out there who figure people like me and all of the people in this country, because they're waking up in droves due to what's happening, the tyranny that's happening in California and other states right now, where they're taking away your right to choose, and they will start to force vaccination upon you. That, my friends, is in direct violation of the Nuremberg codes. We hung people for that. We hung them. And if you don't believe that forcing a vaccination on you against your will is, in fact, in violation of the Nuremberg Code, I will throw the proof at you in such volume it will bury you. So let's think about this again. When your doctor says to you the chances of your child being damaged by vaccines is less than 1 in a million, that's the biggest lie your doctor's ever going to tell you. And if you didn't understand that by what I just described to you, all right, then let's go one step further. Now take the above numbers, the numbers I just gave you, and plot probable vaccine damage, say with 10% reported over the last decade alone. As few as 3 million people, as many as 30 million people. Now try to imagine the damage to American society or humanity, because this is a global issue. We just happen to be the most in the crosshairs, the most vaccinated on the planet. Try to imagine the damage to the American society or humanity over the last century of ever-increasing vaccine proliferation. And you will come to understand, and what I'm about to say, damn right well better stick in your mind, that vaccines are responsible for more death and human suffering than any war in human history. This is not a guess. This is a fact. Okay? Stop and think about that. And I can prove that too. I can prove that statement. We can easily see, with even the most rudimentary research, the possible incidences of vaccine damage is mind-bending. And so far above the lies and platitudes fed to us by these or those, we are conditioned to trust our doctors that it is almost inconceivable. Please understand that if the above statement, the original statement I gave you, that less than 1 in a million are damaged by vaccines, if that were true, vaccines would be among the safest mechanisms on this planet. But all data points blatantly to exactly the opposite. The reality by numbers stated about vaccines over the last century of proliferation could easily be responsible, again, for more suffering and death than any war in American history. Disease, cognitive dysfunctions, sterility are all directly tied by peer-reviewed, thousands of peer-reviewed scientific papers. And I can literally give you links to hundreds of them, the top hundreds, because I've gone through them and picked the best ones out. All of these damages, cognitive dysfunction, okay, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, ADHD. Who are the gold medal winners on the planet for those cognitive dysfunction, brain damage? Alzheimer's, ADHD, autism, dementia. Who? The United States. Who is the most vaccinated society on the planet? The United States. Where does coincidence leave off and it's a fact jump in? And I could give you so many more statistics and so much more proof, but I need to cut this short. Suffice it to say, you need to do some research, because with the tyranny, okay, and we're talking about your rights not to have medication forced into your body. And here's a quote by Thomas Jefferson, and I believe 1794 or 1796. When the people let the government decide what foods they eat and what medicines go into their bodies will soon be as sick as the souls of those who live under tyranny. Tell me that's not exactly where we sit today. A government has given itself the power in several states, and there are already laws and bills in front of Congress to make vaccines mandatory. You will get stuck or else. All right, so now let's go on. Now, if you are the elite and wish to control population, one of the biggest side effects of vaccination is infertility. We know this to be a fact. We know this to be fact. I've done 2 radio shows with Dr. Nagari in Kenya, Africa, where he proved unequivocally by testing, scientific testing of the vaccines, the WHO and UNICEF gave to 8.5 million Kenyan women of childbearing age and children under 5 years of age. Both of these vaccines, one the tetanus and one the polio vaccine, were found to be intentionally spiked with infertility or sterility causing hormones. This is a fact. Now, if you were the elite, one more quick fact. Again, the United States is the most vaccinated society on the planet. The United States has the fastest rising level of infertility on the planet. Another coincidence, right? Okay. Coincidence is too often the tools of tyrants and the belief of fools. Now, if you were the elite and wish to control population under the guise of benevolent actions like the WHO and UNICEF, vaccines would easily be one of your first choices, wouldn't it? Let's go into the last topic for the day. Let's go into fluoride, okay? Fluoride is responsible for more cancer deaths and at a faster pace than any other chemical on this planet. Dr. Dean Burke, PhD, 34 years with the National Cancer Institute. Yes, this is a quote directly from somebody who spent 34 years studying cancer. Nothing causes cancer. No chemical in existence causes cancer in more people or at a faster rate than fluoride. That's a great opening, isn't it? We live in a country that used to boast of having the most freedom, the highest average standard of living, the highest level of productivity, the highest level of scholastic achievement, and one of it, if not the healthiest societies on the planet. My, how the mighty have fallen. In the Liberty Beacon Project, we often discuss the dumbing down of America and point the proverbial finger at the failings of our system of education, our massive onslaught of propaganda, propagandized so-called entertainment, and news shoveled down our throats by the mainstream media, which we know is owned by the same elitist caste who has their root on every other subject we've talked about today. But is this the true mechanism of dumbing down a society, or are there other more physical scenarios in play? Are these assaults on our cognitive abilities intentional, malicious, the result of corruption and complicity, or the result of an incompetent government or regulatory system? Well, I can tell you right now, take the result of incompetent government or regulatory system and kick them out the door, because these are the agents of the big corporations that produce the fluoride. Fluoride is a toxic waste of the manufacture of aluminum, the manufacture of the stuff that you use to make your plants grow, fertilizer, and other items. It is a waste that if these companies would have to dispose of it in a proper fashion, would cost them approximately $6,000 a metric ton to dispose of. Now, if I can sell that to a municipality to put in their water instead for $1,000 a metric ton, I'm not only not paying $6,000 to get rid of it, I'm making $1,000 on it. So if I'm some sort of a bean counter for this company, I'm seeing a $7,000 good reason why I should be selling this fluoride. And massive industries across this country do to these municipalities to put into their water. These are the same companies that own your senators, your congressmen, your presidents, your local board of health, so on and so forth. So this is another huge lie. But what's the fallout of this mechanism? We discuss often the dangers of such known mechanisms as vaccines, GMOs, geoengineering, all proven to cause physical harm to the human physiology, but rarely do we hear much or enough about a huge and continuing blight on a vast portion of this population, fluoride. And again, who is the most fluoridated population on the planet? America! God, isn't it great to live in America? This substance truly has the capability to dumb down and sicken America in a most efficient fashion. Fluoride is a hazardous waste, as I said, a byproduct of aluminum and fertilizer, industrial manufacturing processes, and a form of hydrogen fluoride. This byproduct is extremely corrosive and toxic and, well, to the environment and the human physiology, and has been proven so scientifically through peer-reviewed studies over and over again, through real-world exposure, not just some scientists saying so, but the study of real-world exposure, okay? This is not a guess, but a known fact. Fluoride is also a known neurotoxin, which is a substance that inhibits the functions of neurons. Neurons can be found throughout the brain and the nervous system. And the function of these unique cells is super critical for a variety of tasks, ranging from autonomic nervous system jobs like swallowing to higher level brain functions, thinking, and memory. Neurotoxins can work in a variety of ways, with the danger of exposure varying depending on neurotoxin involved, such as fluoride, and the dosage, well above proven levels of toxicity. In some cases, neurotoxins simply severely damage neurons so that they can not function or attack the signaling capabilities of other neurons by blocking releases of various chemicals or interfering with methods of reception for transmission, such as something telling neurons to send false signals. A neurotoxin may also destroy neurons altogether, resulting in brain damage. We know fluoride causes brain damage. We know fluoride causes cognitive dysfunction. We know America suffers the highest level of cognitive dysfunction on the planet. Now, we talked about vaccines causing cognitive dysfunction. We talked about the Agent Orange causing cognitive dysfunction. We talk about all of these other things causing cognitive dysfunction. This is brain damage. What nation on the planet suffers the highest level of cognitive dysfunction? The United States of America. Which nation has the highest level of fluoride, vaccines, and these other bio and environmental toxins? Gee, that's America. Again, a huge coincidence, right? Okay. Are you aware that as adults, we have what's called a blood-brain barrier? This barrier restricts the passage of toxins such as metals, okay, from crossing into the brain proper and causing massive damage. Now, you need to understand that metals such as mercury and aluminum, which are falling down in nano-sized particles from geoengineering or being injected into our body in vaccines or being sucked up by the roots of our food because it fell down from the sky, saturated the soil, and the food sucked it up through its roots, okay? This mercury and aluminum are highly toxic to the brain and the central nervous system and are contained in such mechanisms as the ones I just gave you, okay? All right. Now, these are contained at such levels that are extremely dangerous to the human physiology. But we have this great blood-brain barrier. It acts like a traffic cop. It says, whoa, hold up. Heavy metals, you're not going to get into the brain. Or very little of you are going to get into the brain. Because I've developed over eons of human evolution, and I'm a great barrier to keep you out. Now, here comes the tyranny. If you don't think that I know this, so the government must know this, and the CDC must know this, and the FDA must know this, and the EPA must know this, then you are an idiot. But let me tell you the biggest kicker here. Because you breathe in that aluminum that fell on you. Okay? That aluminum got stuck in your arm. That mercury got stuck in your arm, and the brain is doing its best, the blood-brain barrier, to keep it from slaughtering brain cells. Until you go home after your vaccine or after your jog, sucking in all those nano-sized particles of aluminum that were falling on you, and you have a nice cold glass of water, or open up a bottle of bottled water and suck it down. Yes, almost every brand of bottled water contains fluoride, and so does your tap water. Fluoride, okay, facilitates the movement of heavy metals such as mercury and aluminum across the blood-brain barrier, allowing for the constant barrage of metals on the brain, slaughtering brain cells and causing cognitive dysfunction, of which the United States suffers the highest level on the planet. Again, coincidence. Okay. Once a portion of the brain is destroyed, there's no going back. The damage is permanent. Now let's discuss the fact that an infant or a small child has no blood-brain barrier up until they don't have a really good solid blood-brain barrier till 24 months, maybe a little older. Okay, when they're first born, they have nothing. At 6 months, just about nothing. At 1 year, a little bit, and then it progresses up. It formulates over the first couple of years of their life, okay? So they have no protection from these metals. So let's talk about the physical and intentional dumbing down of America. They're breathing in that same air you are. They're getting those same injections you are. They're drinking baby formula that uses mercury or uses aluminum in it to keep it from clumping, and it's mixed with fluoridated water. So now these children have no way to protect their brain, and you're putting chemicals into their gut and into their body and directly into their bloodstream that is slaughtering brain cells with absolutely no blood-brain barrier to protect them. Is there any wonder we have the highest level of childhood cancer on the planet? We have the highest level of autism on the planet. We have the highest level of autoimmune dysfunction on the planet. We have the highest level of food allergies on the planet. I never lie. I dare anybody to prove anything I'm saying is wrong. I don't challenge you. I dare you. America is the sickest society on the planet. Will you ever hear your government tell you that? I can give you the answer to that, a resounding no. Ask yourself, no matter how much we protest, we can't get these poisons removed from our water. They won't take the fluoride out. I have seen votes, okay, or local communities rise up against this time after time after time, but yet the board, the town council will overrule them and continue to use the water in their municipal water supplies. They can't get it out. Very, very seldom. There's a few wins across the country, but a hell of a lot more failures. Okay. So why can't we get it out? Because if I know this and you know this, you have to know that the government knows this, and the people who own and control our government and wish to control this society via one of the best mechanisms for dumbing us down, making us sick, making us passive, and helping to sterilize us is fluoride. Okay, fluoride is also a very active substance biologically outside of the brain, interfering with many basic physiological processes in the human body. This is commonly known. Okay, so I made mention to something. I want to mention that real quick. Does your healthy bottled water contain fluoride? Most people buy bottled water today because they're aware of the fluoride issue and they want to bypass it. So they go and get bottled water. I'm about to pop your bubble big time. And again, I never say anything I can't prove. If you think for 1 minute you are escaping all of this neurological and bodily harm by drinking bottled water, you're not. And if you push back against what I'm saying, check the labels. And they don't say or list fluoride as an ingredient. Would you like to know why? You're going to drink that water because, hey, it doesn't say it's got fluoride, so it's got to be safe. Well, surprise, surprise. The EPA does not require bottled water companies to state if their product contains fluoride on their labels. What? Are you kidding me? One of the most deadly toxins on the planet. And the EPA does give us statistics on how much fluoride should be consumed each day. How much is allowed in each liter of water? Okay? What they can't control is, what if you're some fool who only has a glass of water every other day versus the person who jogs, takes care of himself, does this, does that, and drinks 8 to 10 to 12 glasses, 8 to 10 ounce glasses of water every day? Is he helping himself or is he killing himself? According to the government, he's doing what he should be. Bottom line, he's killing himself. He's dumbing himself down. He's going to be the poor SOB with the dementia and the Alzheimer's when he hits my age. He's going to be the one that can't remember what he did a week ago and is wearing diapers at 65 years old. Okay? Over 70% of this adult population, a number that easily exceeds 100 million people today, are aware of the dangers of at least one of these three. We talk about how many people are aware of tyranny in this country today. I'm telling you that at least 100 million people in this country are aware of the dangers of either big pharmaceutical, vaccines, or fluoride. All right. Now, if you stop and consider, okay, let's ask these final questions. And yes, I'm just about done. If you're an elitist caste looking for to control a massive population, okay, if you wanted to pacify said population, if you wanted to lower their ability to reason for themselves, if you wanted to enhance sterility or infertility, inevitably make them docile and more controllable and smaller in numbers, because smaller numbers are easier to control. Shouldn't fluoride be on your short list? All right, that's what I have to say. Now, what I'd like to do at this point, because actually we still got some time left, surprise, surprise. What I'd like to do is make a comment, and then I want everybody to react to this comment. Okay. I promised everybody in the article I wrote today that I would give you an estimate of people who are actually awake. The whole precept of this project, okay, the American Freedom and Unity Project, is based on there are more people awake and aware in this country today than they wish for you to believe. So they constantly tell us too many Americans are asleep. We're never going to get anywhere. Too many Americans are sheeple. Too many Americans are sheep. We all hear that. And some of us, all of us at some time or another, have actually used that line ourselves when we get frustrated. I know we all have. Okay. You're going to find that the 12 people that make up the board of directors in this project are not going to be using these lines anymore. We're going to be saying just the opposite. Now, I'm going to give you rough statistics. When we talk about the health factors that I just discussed, okay, the three of them, we're looking at least 100 million people in this country total that are awake and aware to one or more of those three items: big pharmaceutical issues, vaccine issues, or fluoride issues. All right. If you look at the GMO issue, the last time national polls were run, 94% of this country stated they wanted to have GMOs labeled on their food so that they could know if they were eating them or not. And our federal government just passed a law making it illegal in any state for them to pass a law making it mandatory to label GMOs, whether or not they were GMO'd or not. Again, our country shoves a big old spike up our butt. Again, the tyranny falls. But so 94% polled said they want to know about GMOs. Easy for me to say, well, over 100 million Americans in this country are aware of GMOs on one level or another. Okay, so that's 100 million, 100 million. If we go to political tyranny, I would tell you, go to the internet, do a search, find out how many websites, how many groups, how many pages, how many organizations, how many social forums are related to political tyranny, whether it's the Constitution, liberty, freedom, whatever keywords you wish to put in. You're going to find out that number easily exceeds 50 to 60 million people. I'll tell you that without breaking a sweat. Let's talk about geoengineering. I'll put that number at between 10 and 15 million people. Okay? Let's talk about all of these things. Economic tyranny. Okay? I'm going to tell you today the way the American population is hurting. That number, and again, I'm rounding these numbers off. I can't prove any of these numbers except by doing what I did and what most of these people on this great panel have done, doing the legwork, okay, and putting the numbers together. Economic tyranny, how many people in this country you think are screaming about the economy and about the crap that's going on and the lies we're being told? I would tell you easily it approaches 80 to 100 million people. Now, when you're told that a vast majority of this country is asleep, okay, and too asleep to ever push back, we're talking about, and most people will tell you, less than 5%, or some will go as high as 10% of this country is awake and aware to any of these issues. I'm telling you that if we combine them all, we shake that bottle up real good and throw them dice down onto the table, that number is going to reach anywhere from 120 to 150 million people are awake and aware to at least one of these issues in this country. Now, if we discard all of the children who haven't lived long enough to make up their mind or understand these mechanisms, you're going to come up to about 170 million people, 180 million people in this country. What I am telling you is that the biggest lie you're all being told every single day, even by the people in your groups and your pages and the websites you go to, is that a small portion of this country is actually awake. A very small portion, and we're never going to get anywhere. I'm telling you, it's just the opposite. I'm telling you that we need to connect the dots with everybody because they all fall back on this same elitist caste. These are all weapons of that war. These are the battleships. These are the bombers. These are the pistols. These are the rifles. These are the tanks that are being used against we the people, not only in America, but across the planet. But we are the biggest target, America. These are all the weapons that are being used against us. And they're all being, the triggers on all of them are being pulled by the exact same people. It's time we all woke up to realize when you fight a war, it comes in every direction. We all have to wake up to the fact that if we all, the vaccine groups, the vaccine forums, the vaccine organizations, and all of the other big eight we discussed today, were to realize that we're all fighting the same war, we have a massive amount of this population. We have a very strong, very powerful critical mass that's ready to push back if we can connect the dots for them. And now I'm going to take a breath. Randy, start us off and let's go around and let's finish this time off with a roundhouse discussion.
Oh, sorry. I was muted out there. You know, honestly, almost any discussion at this point, we would not add to, but probably deflect from the core issue, which once again, we've dovetailed into each other as the panel tonight beautifully. And I think we've illustrated the point that in each one of these subject matters, there is a constituency of people who are awake, who are aware, and who are ready to respond to the message. What we need to do now is what the intent of this panel was tonight, is to install with the leadership the idea that we have to put aside the differences that we have. We have to put aside the franchises that we've attempted to establish in our particular areas of specialty and come together under the understanding and the umbrella theme that unless we stand together and we reinforce each other through our differences, through our strengths, and through our ability, each of us to contribute to the subject matter at hand, we are going to collectively be brought under the thumb of this world cabal network. So
how does this relate back, Randy? Because you spoke about this better than just about anybody I've ever talked to at one point, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. The Georgia Guidestone says that the population of this planet should be kept in harmony with the planet, with a population of no more than 500 million. There's 7.5 billion of us. Mm-hmm. Now, is this the elites gloating?
Of course it is. Of course it is. It is an open manifesto. They will always publish what they are doing, as Steve pointed out tonight. They will always tell us their agenda and what they were doing, and they will do it in very cryptic ways right under our faces if we don't pay attention. So for each one of us, it's just a matter of deciphering the code. I think even the guy in the streets deciphered the code. The question is, will we come together now, and will we work together to overthrow the tyranny that's around us? Unmute. Yeah. You're muted. Roger, you're muted.
See, nobody's immune to that. All right, let's jump in on this, and let me put one more point in, and then let's throw this over to Steve, okay? And we want everybody to have a chance to talk about this, so let's try and keep our comments to like 2 or 3 minutes. That way we can probably make it around a couple of times. All right, we discussed that there are so many awake and aware people. We showed why there are so many awake and aware people. We showed how it all leads back to the same people perpetrating the war on all of us using multiple weapons. We also stated that the biggest reason we don't have the huge critical mass that we need is because we're all being convinced we don't have it. We know we do. But we have a problem in leadership. We have a problem in jealousy. We have a problem. This is my yard. Don't come and play in my yard. Go play in yours. This is my sandbox. Go play in your sandbox. We have people who want to protect their power, their authority, their influence. This is a fact. Otherwise, every vaccine group out there would have formed a coalition a long time ago. Every constitutional group out there would have formed a coalition a long time ago, and we just don't see this. Pick that football up and run with it, please, Steve.
Well, a different slant on that is that because there is so much division,
I can barely hear you, Steve.
The big another slant on that is that because there is so much division, that and the egos and the territories are so important to a lot of these different groups and people, everyone's off doing their own thing. And the general public is getting burnt out trying to figure out which way to go, who they're going to follow. They go to one event, they can't go to other events. Everyone wants to have their own event, and it just is burning everybody out. The last couple of big things that we've tried to see happen here in the country, just the turnout isn't there. And the traditional leaders that have been getting the big groups out, their crowds are dissipating by huge amounts. People are just tired, fed up. They don't see things working. Part of it's because a lot of these activities aren't directed towards the solution. They're directed towards pointing out what problems are. Well, we all know what the problems are. What are you going to do about it? That's the question. And just going to just ad infinitum, different groups doing different things. They all want to do their own thing, or they all want to be known for their own activity, and it's burning everyone out.
Absolutely. And we're down to 10 minutes. So if you could please, Susan, jump in for about a minute or two here, please.
Well, I would say agree with everybody, and also mention that economics has everything to do with it. A lot of people don't have the funding, the money, and they want to help, but they just can't possibly get their funding together, their monies together. So I think what we're planning for next summer is going to be fantabulous.
That's how I'm going to end this show, is announcing that. Yep. Nope, you're right. You're absolutely right.
We need sponsors that are going to be able to facilitate us and bring this,
all being worked on. That's why we have a 12-member board of directors for this project. You're absolutely right. And all of you have so many contacts and so many people you can reach out to. Literally, the core group of the 12 people who are the board of directors of this project have hundreds of thousands of contacts. Any last words from you, Russ, please?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Roger. I want to demonstrate my support by backing you up on 3 points.
Okay, you've only got about a minute.
Number one, the late Dr. Mayer Eisenstein, 30,000 children under his care, all unvaccinated, 3 cases of autism. 1 had no vaccination record, likely vaccinated. 2 others adopted from China, likely vaccinated. All 30,000 children besides those 3, no autism. Number 2, immunization rates. Tuberculosis, Canada, mortality rates per 100,000 between 1880 and 1960 decrease 80 to 90% before tuberculosis vaccine introduced. Measles, before vaccine introduced. More tuberculosis in the United States versus Canada, reduced. Pertussis, same story. Scarlet fever, same story, over and over and over again. Before vaccinations were introduced, these diseases were dramatically reduced. Last point, JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, 1997, quote, drug-related morbidity and mortality have been estimated to cost more than $136 billion a year in the United States. These estimates are higher than the total cost of cardiovascular care or diabetes in the United States. A major component of these costs is ADEs, adverse drug reactions. In addition, ADEs may account for 140,000 deaths annually in the United States. Here's my addendum. It's widely accepted that less than 2%, like you said, Roger, of ADs are reported as being such. Death is nearly always attributed to the disease being treated by the drug or the sudden onset of another symptom. Therefore, it is likely that deaths from doctor-prescribed pharmaceutical drugs in the United States alone exceeds 2.8 million yearly.
FDA approved. Okay, I've got to move over to you, Rebel. Not got to, but I wish to. Please give us about a 1-minute wrap up, and then I'm going to announce to everybody exactly what we plan to do.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks again for having this event here, Roger. And I mean, speaking to unity, it's important that we embrace each other's strengths instead of constantly judging each other. I see a lot of people doing that in activism, and it's just not getting us anywhere. Also realizing the synergistic effects that we're experiencing from all these different areas: vaccines, GMOs, climate engineering, the air we're breathing, the water we're drinking. It all adds up, and it all works in tandem to make us sicker and sicker and sicker. And I think, people are awake and aware about maybe certain areas and this area and that area. If we can put that all together and really form unity, true unity, standing beside each other, not behind somebody else and playing follow the leader, then perhaps we'll make some progress creating a better world.
All right, perfect. Okay, now let me tell you why we gave this absolutely phenomenal, and I enjoyed so much the information that was put out today. Panel discussion today. Again, the name of the project is the American Freedom and Unity Project. What we are going to do is this 12-member board of directors is going to start contacting all of the leaders of all of the groups, the pages, the organizations, the forums, everything that we can find that exists within our categories as we pick them. We're going to go out to each and every one of these leaders, and we are going to pass along this video. We're going to pass along some great links that we're going to accumulate where they can actually see that all of this draws back to the exact same root cause. How many limbs does a tree have? How many leaves does a tree have? But it all goes back to the root. It all goes back to the root. And every issue we've discussed today goes back to an elitist caste that is hell-bent on controlling us economically, hell-bent on controlling us physically, and hell-bent on controlling us as far as the size of our population, because the smaller the population, the easier it is to control it. Every mechanism, whether it's vaccines, all the way to economics, all goes back to the same root. We have not determined a date yet, but what this is going to culminate in is mid-2016. There is going to be a conference, a physical conference somewhere in Heartland America, so that people on the West Coast don't have to fly all the way to the East Coast, and people on the East Coast don't have to fly all the way to the West Coast. Somewhere in Heartland America, we are going to have a conference that is not going to be a 1,000,000-man march. It's not going to be a 1,000,000 biker roll or a 1,000,000 trucker roll. It's going to incorporate the leaders of all of these organizations, because these are the people we need to convince. These are the people we need to bring on board. These are the people we need to educate. So every leader of every vaccine group that we can grab a hold of, every leader of every GMO group, every political tyranny group, every perpetual warfare group that we can grab a hold of, we will have a physical conference in Heartland America in the middle of 2016, and that date will be published as soon as we come to an agreement on it. And that's going to be dependent on how quickly we can find locations to support us, sponsor us, so on and so forth. We're not talking about big corporations like Merck or Monsanto giving us money to do this. We're talking about grassroots support. This conference will be attended by the leadership of these forums, and those who cannot attend will be able to attend by live streaming media. We are going to formulate a consortium of leaders across these 8 topics, and we're all going to stand side by side, and we're all going to yell so loud that we can no longer be ignored and we can no longer be discounted. And Randy, for 2 hours of donated time, I want to give you the final word here. So please, because the eloquence with which you speak is unmatched.
The only thing I want to say in closing is this. Those who are going to see these videos, please circulate them. Please share them. If you're a leader out there, if you're somebody who has a voice, who has an audience, who has a group, consider for a moment the message tonight. Put aside your differences with others. Put aside your franchise. Put aside your personal interests. We can all work together. We can work out the fine details of what is correct and what will work later on. We can agree on one thing. If we don't move this movement forward now, tomorrow it will be too late. Time's running out. We need to get organized. We need to unify. We need to put arms together and put aside our personal differences in order to bring America back.
All right, everybody needs to know one more thing, okay? That is, yes, the Liberty Beacon did put this initial show together. The Liberty Beacon Project did help to formulate the original group of 12, although we didn't bring them all in. They were all agreed upon by the entire board of directors. But this is not the Liberty Beacon Project. This is an American grassroots project. I do not run this project. I do not lead this project. I am very proud to have these 5 individuals and the other 6 who could not be on the panel tonight standing beside me. And if I had asked them to stand behind me, how many of them do you think would have been on this show today? I would have proven myself the biggest hypocrite on this planet. So do not mistake this. And do not, if you don't like the Liberty Beacon Project, or if you have something personally against me, do not forego all the wisdom you've heard because you feel this is a TLB project. It is not. Does everybody here agree with that? Have I not practiced that since day one? Do you all agree with that? Somebody's got to say something or I look stupid.
Fine, brother.
All right. I don't know how much time we have left.
None. Actually, we're over time.
Okay. Everybody, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
And we all appreciate you. And thank you all for being here. You guys are great. All 5 of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Mwah.
Thanks a lot. God bless you.
If you really had to make a difference on a large scale with minimal resources, how would you go about it? Have you ever dared to dream of doing that which seems impossible? On a planet steeped with corruption and destruction, the question beckons, how do we change it? Media has a far-reaching impact on people and has been used to manipulate humanity into our current destructive patterns. In order to affect people into moving into constructive patterns of behavior, we need to construct a new paradigm of media. Conscious Consumer Network has been created with the explicit intention of giving the amazing truth-seeking, solutions-orientated, alternative media a place to fully realize their true potential with a cutting-edge, high-tech professional media platform. In turn, some of the greatest freedom-seeking hearts and souls of our time have realized the true potential of what has been created and have come together to provide their insight and inspiration on CCN. Conscious Consumer Network has become a unique, interactive information and educational network which provides a free-to-view, live-stream, ultra-high-definition channel to the world and features 25 live shows a week and growing with the addition of multiple language broadcasts. CCN has features comparable with mainstream media, such as being able to pause and rewind broadcasts whilst being live-streamed. Catch up on missed or previous broadcasts, now available from CCN high-definition downloads. You can now purchase a high-definition download of your favorite CCN show from ethymarket.com. Support free and independent media by becoming a monthly pledger. This can be done with a monthly pledge of €10, which will allow you unlimited access to CCN's high-definition downloads, which hosts a back catalogue of over 250 shows, which have been aired since the launch of CCN on the 1st of January 2015. In order to keep CCN on the air, public funding is needed. Please donate to CCN's Network Support Fund or become a monthly pledger. Help keep alternative media in the hands of the people. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.